Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Flash Forward, the show where I talk about every single issue of The Flash and all the Flash specials and just everything Flash related. This week, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Grant Morrison and Mark Millar Flash run in its entirety. So, back in 1997, towards the end of 1997, Grant Morrison and Mark Millar took over writing The Flash for Mark Waid, who had taken a break. He comes back, but he needed to take a year off because he was working on The Flash so long, I guess he just got burnt out. I think he went and wrote like a JLA miniseries while he was gone, and a couple other things. So yeah, Grant Morrison and Mark Millar were brought on to do the series in his stead. And it's widely considered to be up there as like one of the best Flash runs. Despite it only being 12 issues, their run is considered to be really good. That's what I've always heard. And, reading it now, I can see why people really, really loved it. So yeah, we'll just get straight into it, shall we? But before I do, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video and hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified for new videos every Sunday. So we're starting with issue 130, written by Grant Morrison and Mark Millar, with art by Paul Ryan and John Nyberg. This is the first of a three-part story known as Emergency Stop. So it begins at Keystone County Jail, where a prisoner is killed by a mysterious being who seems to be a suit. Like, just a costume. There's no face. Nobody's in it. It's just a costume that can shoot beams. It's like, and it's like, it's good to be back. Meanwhile, Wally West and Linda Park, Wally West has taken Linda Park around the world, traveling all the way to India for her birthday. Because apparently the greatest sunset in the world was going on in India, and Wally decided to take her there because she deserves it, because he really loves her. So they spend lunch in India, and meanwhile, back in Keystone City, Max Mercury and Jay Garrick find Wally's dead body with a note around it that says, "Dear Flash, you have 60 minutes to solve your own murder, The Suit." And the name The Suit rings a bell to Jay Garrick. And they come to the conclusion that this really is Wally, but it must be him from the future because the suit is a bit wet, but it hasn't rained yet. So they're assuming that it's about this must be an hour in the future, and they have 60 minutes to figure out who kills Wally and how to stop it from happening. So Jay and Max visit Wally, they wake him up and they tell him what's going on, and Wally's like, "Alright, let's go, superhero business. You continue sleeping, Linda. I gotta go be a superhero." So he heads off with Jay and Max, and they head to the Keystone morgue, where the doctor says, "This is Wally. There's a very good chance that this is Wally. We haven't done a full autopsy, but, DNA is matching, everything's matching." And so Wally's like, "We only have half an hour. Okay, let's figure this out." And meanwhile, the suit, as it will come to be known, visits Drew McPhee, a character who is known as the Fashioneer. And the Fashioneer is like, "What are you doing here?" Because the suit starts talking slack to him, saying that the Fashioneer is could do a lot better if the suit were there to help him. And the Fashioneer is like, "What are you talking about? Who are you? Show me your face." And the suit's just like, there isn't really a lot to show. And then the suit is like, "But we could really use each other, or at least I could use you to get what we want." And so the suit forces himself, or itself, onto Drew McPhee and takes over him. And so like Drew can't get out of the suit, and the suit now has full control over him. So Wally, Jay, and Max go and visit this guy named Double Negative, who is this dude that he's kind of like two guys in one, where he's constantly like vibrating. He's kind of got like two heads constantly. Like he's it's hard to explain. He's kind of like like if you had like if you were like two copies stuck together that were kind of vibrating, that's what he looks like. So you can always see like he looks like he has two heads even though he's just one guy. I don't know, it's hard to explain. You would know what I mean. He's kind of like a shadow dude. He tells them the origin of the suit because he saw what happened the night that the two prisoners died that were killed by the suit earlier in the story. And it's also like a local legend. So many years ago, there was Gamby. Now, I've mentioned Gamby before. He was a tailor who created suits for the Rogues and many other different supervillains. He created the suit, this suit. And they even say that like he breathed actual life into it. And the suit found its way onto this guy known as Del Merriweather, who went around killing people. He killed like 6 cops, 12 people. And he was stopped by Hal Jordan and got the electric chair. So he got executed. And they threw the suit in the furnace, but they realized that the suit they couldn't destroy it. But however, they could hurt it. The suit managed to get away, and it dug itself, the suit was trying to like bury itself. And they say that when it escaped, it had like the spirit of Del Merriweather inside it. So the suit tried to bury itself. And many years later, the prison was built on top of where it buried itself. And these two guys the two prisoners performed a seance. And the suit broke out of the floor and then killed them. And now it's going on a rampage, going to try and kill the Flash. So Wally decides that he's going to head for he's gonna head for Merriweather, like not Merriweather. He's gonna head for the suit, which I guess is Merriweather because it's got spirit in it. And he tells Jay and Max to go to the morgue while he deals with Merriweather. So Wally decides that what he's gonna do is fight the suit, and during the fight, the suit freezes Wally in place. But Wally knows, Wally's kind of figured out what's happened, and he knows that he's actually alive. He's not dead. He tells Jay and Max, he's like, I'm pretty sure I'm alive, so go to the morgue and stop him from cutting me open, otherwise this is going to be all over. So they head back to the morgue, and it turns out Wally is alive, and that he's in a time loop. He's created like a time loop. So this Wally from the future heads to the present Wally who is fighting the suit and vibrates the present Wally so that he will appear to have died. He vibrates his molecules so that Wally ends up in a coma and appears to be dead in order to save his own life. And, that kind of starts the loop. I don't know how the loop gets fixed, but that's how Wally saves his own life. I guess this is how the loop gets fixed. He saves his own life by vibrating his own body so that he ends up in a coma. But when the explosion happens, because the suit causes an explosion when he tries to kill Wally, a piece of rock hits Wally in the head, causing him to crash into a nearby house. And then the suit puts the note on him, and then that version of Wally... Oh, no. So, yeah, that's what it is. So the suit goes and finds the... This is really confusing. This is why it's really hard to do time travel or, time loop stories, because it gets really confusing to explain. So the Wally that has crashed is the one that they found that was unconscious. So he puts the note on this Wally, but because Wally has broken the time loop, that Wally just fades out of existence. And then, but the suit doesn't realize, and so he kind of just heads off and causes terror. And then Jay and Max find the real Wally, or like the current Wally, that hasn't been erased out of time. And this Wally has broken his leg. Because when he got hit by the rock, he crashed and he broke his leg. I'm sorry, it's really hard to explain this. I tried my best. Because, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I really enjoyed this story, but it's really hard to explain because it's like, Wally put himself into a state where it seemed like he died, but because he broke his leg, the suit putting the note on him and then finding his body never happened because he broke his leg, and so, like, that's broken the time loop. As far as I can tell, that's the best way to explain it. Jeez. I hope it doesn't come off across as like I didn't enjoy, I'm annoyed or something. I'm not. I'm just frazzled because, like, explaining this is hard. But yeah, Wally has broken his leg. That is the final bit. He broke his leg, which is massive. Because, you know, how's the Flash supposed to run if he breaks his leg? So we'll find out what happens to Wally next in issue 131, where he deals with his broken leg. Okay, so I thought over what happened at the end of the last issue a little bit, and I did figure it out. So, yeah, the suit thought that it killed Wally, but because Wally was able to create the time loop by saving himself, by making it look like he died, even though he didn't, it allowed him to not die so that he could then save himself in the future. But he ended up breaking his legs, and that apparently broke the time loop. That's what happened. Which doesn't really make any sense, because if he broke his legs, then that means he can't save himself. If he breaks his leg, then that means his body can't be found, which means he can't eventually save himself and then break his legs. So that's why it's really, really hard to do time travel stories, because you just end up in paradoxes like this. But enough about that. We're moving on with the story. We don't need to worry about that anymore, because Wally has broken not just one leg, but both of his legs. I thought he only broke one leg. He's broken both of his legs. And so everyone has gathered together, like Max, Jay, and Bart, and Wally comes to the conclusion that they can go after the suit. They just have to pretend to be him. So if they pretend to be the Flash, then the suit might get confused and they might be able to beat him. And it turns out that the suit is sucking the life force without anyone that wears it. So Del Merriweather's dead. Oh, not Del Merriweather. The fashioneer. He's dead. He's reduced to nothing but a skeleton. And then the suit takes over a police, like a patrolman. And Linda hears from some connections that a patrolman's radio has come through, and that it's the suit, and that he's heading for the prison. And so they decide to try and go and stop the suit. So Bart, wearing Wally's costume, heads to the bridge and destroys it, causing the suit to crash off of the motorcycle that he's driving and fall onto a nearby bank. Meanwhile, Wally and Linda have a conversation about something that Wally has decided to come up with, which is he's been learning a lot about the Speed Force, and he believes that if he tries hard enough, he could create a suit out of the Speed Force, and that would at least allow him support so that he can move around even though his legs are broken. Part of this story that doesn't really make sense is that he talks about how, like, in order to learn how to use the Speed Force in a way that would allow him to create this suit, he goes to Jessie Quick and he asks her for her dad's formula. But Grant Morrison or Mark Millar, I'm about to call you out on this. Wally already knew Johnny Quick's formula because he was taught it. he was taught it by Johnny Quick, and he used it in an earlier issue, and when he used it, he ended up frozen in time. There was a whole story that Mark Waid wrote about it, so why didn't you go back and read that, huh? Mark, Grant? Why didn't you read it? Why didn't you read that story? It's very clear that you didn't. So yeah, Wally goes to Jesse Quick and he asks, like, Wally gets amnesia for a moment, and he forgets that he knows Johnny Quick's number, and so he goes and asks Jesse Quick what it is. He's like, Jesse, I forgot I know your dad already told me, but I forgot what the number is, so can you tell me it again? And she's like, it's this, it's 3XY, blah, blah, blah. And so Wally learns the number again, and while he's in his room, it starts working. The Speed Force starts, like, wrapping itself around his arm, and he's succeeding in creating a suit made out of the Speed Force. And he's like, Linda, come in quick, this is amazing, look, I've done it. Meanwhile, Jay, Bart, and Max all fight the suit. They actually throw Wally's costume at him, and the suit is just like, what the hell is going on? And they all come at him, and a big explosion happens, and Max is in the suit. The suit has managed to take a hold of take a hold of Max and take over his body. So now the suit has super speed. So he runs away, and Jay and Bart chase after him, and the suit heads to the prison and fights Jay and Bart, and actually grabs Bart and throws him at the prison wall, and Jay's just like, Impulse, vibrate through the wall, and Impulse vibrates through the wall, but that's exactly what the suit wanted. He's like, yes, vibrate at the perfect frequency so that the wall explodes, and the wall explodes, freeing all the prisoners, and they all go to kill Jay, because the suit is like, you ravage the city, like, you feed me your life energy, and I'll let you ravage the city as much as you want and cause as much chaos and stuff as you want. And Jay's the only one standing in their way, and he's like, oh, Joan, baby, I love you. Come on, man, all of you. And he, like, stands up to all of them, and then a golden hand rests on Jay's shoulder, and he's like, huh? He's like, Jay? And it turns out that it's Wally West. He calls from behind the suit, and he's like, my name's Wally West. I'm the fastest man alive. And I'm closing you down. And we get to see Wally's Speed Force costume, which looks a lot like Impulse's costume. Some would say it looks like the Kid Flash costume, but nah, it looks like Impulse's, because he's got goggles. It's like a golden variation. Imagine Wally wearing Impulse's costume, except it's completely gold, and there's like a white lightning bolt from one shoulder down to his side, like diagonally across, and then his hair is coming out the top. That's what the new suit looks like. It looks pretty cool. It's not a suit that I would want him to wear for a long time, but I'm fine with it being... I have a feeling it's just a... just a temporary suit. And as a temporary suit, it's pretty good. Not a permanent one, though. But yeah, that's the end of issue 131. Much easier to explain than the last one. We don't have to worry about any time loops or anything. But yeah, the next issue we're going to be talking about is issue 132, which was a part of a initiative that DC had in 1997, which was called, like, the Face Forward or, like, Face On event. It's not an event, but, like, it was an event, but it wasn't, like, a crossover event. So, Face On was an initiative that DC did where all the covers were going to have, like, the face of the main character, and it was going to be them facing something related to them. So these issues were supposed to matter, and for it to be, like, a character facing a dark part of their life, or, like, a big part of their life, and pushing through it. Yeah, so we'll see what Wally's is going to be in his Face On, Face Forward, whatever the name of it was, issue. I'll be interested to see what Grant Morrison and Mark Millar cooked up. Alright, so starting off in issue 132, Wally has arrived in his Speed Force costume. Jay is a bit upset because Wally kind of ruined his last stand. Bart is realizing where he is and what he's done. And the suit realizes that the Flash is still alive, so he runs straight at Wally, and Wally dodges him, and Wally and the suit begin fighting. But before they do, actually, he goes to quickly talk to Jay and find out what's happened. And Jay explains to Wally that they tried to take down the suit managed to take control of Max, and now he has Max's powers. And so Wally is like, alright, Jay, you and Bart take care of the prisoners, I'll take care of the suit and figure out a way to destroy him and save Max. And he passes some of his speed energy onto Jay, who Jay can then share with Bart so that they can run a bit faster, or run a lot faster than they usually can. So the suit grabs a bunch of wood and starts throwing wooden spikes at Wally, and Wally runs through them, causing them to explode because he can vibrate through objects, but he can't do it without whatever he vibrates through blowing up, and atomizing. So Wally runs full speed at the suit, and the suit runs full speed at him, and then Wally dodges the suit, and causing the suit to not collide into anything. So the suit, he counts on the suit just running for a long time, giving Wally enough time to figure out a way to destroy it. So he's like, the suit is probably in Singapore at the moment, so that gives me a few minutes to figure out how to destroy it before it eventually makes its way all the way back here. Meanwhile, Jay and Bart take down the prisoners. Bart just runs through using super speed and just ties them all up. He takes one of the guy's clothes off, which is kind of funny. And and then he and Jay decide to head off to find Wally, and or at least Jay heads off to find Wally and the suit, and Bart stays behind to deal with the prisoners. So Wally eventually comes up with a plan on how to defeat the suit. They run at one another, and the suit actually uses air to get rid of enough of Wally's Speed Force suit that he can't walk anymore because his legs are still broken. So Wally falls to the ground because his legs are no longer covered by the Speed Force suit. And while he's on the ground, he grabs a little bit of sand in between his fingers and rubs them together. And the suit walks up to him and is like, tell me something, all those super criminals you fought back then, always tying you to giant boomerangs or enormous exploding darts. Why didn't they just kill you? And Wally's like, I don't know, that was a different Flash. Happier times, I guess. That was my Uncle Barry. You remember Uncle Barry, don't you, Max? And Uncle Max is like, what? I know you... And Wally's just like, I know you remember, Max. You're Max Mercury. All I need is 1 second, Max. And Max is just like... Wally! And manages to get control of the suit long enough that Wally can throw the sand that he had in his fingertips at the suit, which creates a small puncture in the suit, and then using his super speed, he grabs the small puncture and grabs the thread from the puncture and just unravels the suit entirely, freeing Max. He's like, wow, first time I've ever unraveled a villain. And so Wally is like, how did you survive, Max? He was sucking out your life energy. And Max is like, well, he wasn't actually sucking up my life energy. I managed to feed him the Speed Force instead, so he was sucking on that. And then Jay shows up, and then the suit reveals that it's still alive and comes at them, and Max reveals to Wally that it's not actually Del Merriweather. It was a being from another planet that was beamed onto Earth during the execution that then possessed the suit. It's unknown if it also fused with Del, or if Del was even a part of it. They don't even bother to really explain. Wally asks, and Max just kind of avoids it. And then the suit takes over Jay's body, because it reveals that the suit is still alive. It takes over Jay's body, and Wally's like, no, you're going to kill him, he's too old. And the suit's just like, I don't care, I'm going to take as much life force as I can. And Wally's like, no, wait, let him go, take me instead. And so the suit agrees and sets Jay free and takes control of Wally. But then Wally uses vibrates his body, because as we know, when he vibrates, he atomizes everything around it, and that includes the suit. So he vibrates and causes the suit to explode and become completely destroyed, as far as we know, to the atomic size. I don't know if the suit is going to come back, but yeah, he did it. The suit is destroyed. Bart says something a bit weird. He's like, hey, not bad for a crip. It's like, okay. Alright. Way to be a little bit, way to be a little bit ableist there, Grant and Mark. It's a bit weird. You know, they do refer to Wally as a cripple, and I can let that slide at least, because like that was just a regular term for disabled people in the 90s. It wasn't great, but like, you know, many people didn't really consider it a slur back then. But, you know, Bart just being like, wow, you did great for a crip, like that's something I can't really let slide. I'm glad we're no longer in those kind of times. So Wally, after winning the day, parts ways, like after saving the day, he parts ways with Jay, Max, and Bart, and he heads home and he finds Linda, and Linda's talking backwards for some reason. And she's not just talking backwards, she's walking backwards. And Wally tries to touch her, and he feels that the air is like glue, and that something's wrong, and then he hears somebody talking, and that person is like, forget it, pal, she's away in a world of her own. Typical lassie, eh? It's what you might call a mirror dimension. I'm not going to do a Scottish accent, even though this is who you probably think it is. Time goes backwards in there, and the further back you get, the faster it goes, you know? So the short story is, I'm not sure when you guys started winching and that, but at the speed she's going, I say you got about 15 minutes before your classy bird there reverses right out of your life, big man. And it turns out that it's Evan McCulloch, a.k.a. the Mirror Master, and that he's done something to Linda. He's forced Linda into the mirror dimension, and if Wally doesn't do something, he's probably going to lose her forever, because right now time is reversed, and if it keeps reversing, eventually they're not going to know each other anymore, and who knows how far it's going to go. So we're going to have to find out in issue 133 if Wally can stop the Mirror Master. I mean, he probably will. But yeah, we're going to find out how. So, issue 133, Wally has arrived home to find that Linda is going backwards, and it's because of Mirror Master. He's trapped her in a mirror dimension, and he tells Wally that the reason he's done this is because it's a classic Flash versus Mirror Master thing. And Wally is like, yeah, but like the old Mirror Master didn't put he played fair, he played by the rules, he didn't put Barry's like girlfriends in danger. Like, Linda has no part in this. It's supposed to be Mirror Master versus Flash, and Mirror Master is like, well, we're both the second generation, so we switch things up a bit, you know? So he tells Wally that he has 15 minutes in order to save Linda. But he also reveals to Wally that's not going to be easy, because Mirror Master has extremely good technology now that lets him multiply himself into 1 million copies to infest a city immediately. And then he creates this prism, and because Wally is running through the city trying to find who the real Mirror Master is, he's running so fast, he doesn't see the prism fast enough, and he runs straight into it at super speed, and comes out the other side of the prism, split into 7 separate flashes, all of a different color, all of a different emotion. they're all bickering and stuff, but they've got to come together and figure out how to regroup as one Flash so that they can stop Mirror Master. Meanwhile, Mirror Master heads to the Keystone National Bank, where he uses his mirror abilities to make everyone see their inner demons. So everyone starts freaking out. Like, there's this security guard that sees a mirror of him, like a mirror reflection of himself, like whipping his kid or his wife. No, beating his. It's like he's either beating his kids or he's beating his wife. I don't know which it is. He's beating somebody. It's presumably a family member. And everyone else is freaking out, seeing like their worst selves in their mirrors. So Mirror Master is free to just go to the giant safe. He blinds one of the security guards. He straight up blinds him, and he's like, "Hey, you'll be fine. You can read in Braille." And then he uses his mirror gun to open up a mirror portal, which allows him to travel through the door to the other side of the safe. Meanwhile, the copies, all figure out that if they run back into the prism through the other side at super speed, they should merge back into one Wally again. So they do exactly that. They just run straight back through it, through the other side, and they become one Flash. It turns out that the technology that Mirror Master is using was given to him by Neron. That's what he sold his soul for, was for this insane technology that allows him to do all this crazy mirror shit. As Wally's trying to run back to Mirror Master, because he's got like 8 minutes left, he starts growing ginormous, colliding with the city, and he realizes that it's just Mirror Master creating illusions for him to try and stop him from getting back to the bank. And then he eventually pushes through these illusions, makes it back to the bank, where he finds that Mirror Master has been tied up by another Flash. And the Mirror Master says that the Wally that has just arrived is an evil clone. And Wally looks down, he's like, "I'm not a clone, my lightning bolt's the right way." And he looks down and his lightning bolt's the wrong way. And so he starts getting chased by this other Wally, because this Wally thinks that he's an evil clone. And as he's running through the city, he realizes that the signs are backwards, and that he is in a mirror world. So he's not actually an evil clone. The reason why his lightning bolt is backwards is because he's in a mirror world. So he escapes through he figures it out, he exits the mirror world, and Mirror Master's like, "Dang it, it's the signpost, isn't it, man? It always ruins the gimmick." "Still, never mind, your card's marked now, cheerio," and he pulls out a mirror gun, to kill Wally. And it turns out Wally pulled the chip out of the gun in what he calls a picosecond. He's like, "I took it out in a picosecond. Alright, so now you gotta tell me how to free Linda." He's like, "Are you a head case or something? I can't do hee-haw without the central processor." "I'm serious, alright? The stolen DOS, the escape plan that allows you moving backwards in time. That wee dolly bird you're going out with is going to disappear back into her mom's belly if I don't find the gadgets to get this working again." And he tells Wally, like, where it is. He's like, "Oh, it's in Hawaii." And Wally's like, "Well, why did you say that? We can get there in 3 seconds." And so he travels to the place that Mirror Master needs to go to get the technology that he needs. He gives it to Mirror Master to fix his mirror gun. And, Wally's like, how am I sure you're not going to run away while I'm gone? And Mirror Master's like, "You're just going to have to trust, you're going to have to pick either you stop me, you make sure I don't get away, or you save that bird of yours." And Wally's just like, "Why are you doing this? You could use this technology to help people, and yet you just go around, like, hurting people and doing this bank robbery crap." And McCulloch's just like, "We do it for the money." And Wally's like, "Why? Why do you need this money?" And McCulloch's just like, "We need the money to do bigger jobs, to get bigger money, to do bigger jobs, to get bigger money. It never ends." And Wally's like, "You're insane." And so Wally heads off and he finds Linda, and it turns out that Linda is free from the mirror world. So before he can, kiss her or something, he has to quickly head back and stop Mirror Master from escaping. And he uses, the residuals of his speed force to drag Mirror Master with him. Because it turns out, and I didn't even figure this out while I was reading it, when he traveled to go and see Linda, he was actually pulling Mirror Master with him the entire time using the residuals of his Speed Force. So he was able to keep an eye on Mirror Master and go check on Linda. And so Mirror Master tries to shoot him with his gun, but it's not working. And so Wally takes him to prison, locks him up in a cell, and Mirror Master's just like, I can get out of here whenever I want, and all I need is reflections. And Wally's like, well, you can't, have reflections when you can't see anything. And he shuts the lights off in in Mirror Master's cell, so Mirror Master is in pitch black, and that's how you beat Mirror Master, I guess. You lock him in a cell without any light, and it's just pitch black. And so Wally heads back to Linda, and Linda's like, alright, you've taken down the Mirror Master, now you gotta rest. You gotta rest like the doctor told you to. Alright? And while Wally's resting, he does something that I don't like it when writers do this, when they clearly are just speaking through a character. But in this issue, Wally got a new costume. He's using the Speed Force costume now, and I have no problem with Wally wearing a costume made out of the Speed Force. But the problem I have with this costume is the way it's designed. It looks too much like Barry Allen's costume. I'm not a fan of Wally West's costume without the white eyes, because when he doesn't have the white eyes, he looks too much like Barry. And this is going to be a consistent thing from now on until like 2006 or something, or I think it's until Barry comes back. Wally will just rock this new costume and just look like Barry for a long time. And it's like, the reason he got a new costume with the white eyes in the first place was so that he could feel different and have a costume that feels different. And it feels kind of like a step backwards for Wally to decide to make a new costume that looks exactly like, or doesn't look exactly like, but look a lot like Barry's again. I'm not a fan of the lack of the white eyes. And what makes it even worse for me is that, like, Wally himself in the comic is like the Speed Force costume looks good in red. I think I'll keep it even when my legs get better. Those white Batman eyes were never really me anyway. What do you think? And it's like, Wally, what are you doing? You're not like it's like he's not. This isn't Wally talking. This is Grant Morrison and Mark Millar, whichever one it was that wrote this dialogue. This is them saying that they don't like the white eyes, and so Wally doesn't like the white eyes. And it's just like, okay, cool. Take away a cool design. I like them, but we can get rid of them. I know that they're going to be back eventually, but yeah, it was a bit upsetting to be reading that. It's like, keep your own like opinions on the stuff out of the character's mouth, But whatever. That's the end of issue 133, and so the next issue we're going to be talking about is issue 134, which seems to be a Jay Garrick focused issue. So looking forward to this. We don't really get, like, Jay Garrick appears in issues as a side character, but very rarely do we get a Jay focused issue. So I'm looking forward to this one. Right, so issue 134. This one we are going to get to see a day in the life of Jay Garrick, who has currently taken over as the main Flash of Keystone City, while Wally is recovering from his broken legs. Apparently Wally is going to be good in a day, and so yeah, we get to see what happens in Jay's life on that final day that he's going to be the main Flash. So first thing we learn is that he goes to visit a dear friend of his, Clifford DeVoe, who is the original Thinker, but he's not the Thinker anymore. He has brain cancer. Doctor says he only has a couple of days to live, so he asks Jay to go get him some alcohol, like get him a drink. And Jay's like, are you really sure you should be drinking that? And Cliff's just like, I'm gonna die in a few days anyway. This isn't really harming me. And then Jay says that, like, there has to be a way to, like, you might be able to pull through this. Doctor says you have a few days, but there's always the odds that you're going to be okay. And Clifford DeVoe is just like, what is it with superheroes? Why do you have this ridiculous compulsion to save us all the time? Are you scared you won't have anyone else to go to the movies with on Wednesday afternoons? Here's to life, Jay. Enjoy it before it forgets who you are. And he clicks his drink with Jay. And so Jay goes to the snowy mountains to just ponder. And then he heads back home to Joan, his wife, and talks about how he's going to take her on a date to, like, different countries and stuff. And Joan's just like, I just want to have dinner here. Like, I just want to have dinner in Keystone City. You know, we don't have to be going around all the time to different countries. And Jay's just like, you're dating a superhero. Like, come on, take advantage of it. Jay talks about how he's really enjoying being the main Flash of Keystone City. Unlike most of his friends who have retired or are taking things slowly, Jay has never slowed down when it comes to being a superhero. Like, he was previously retired, he's no longer retired. Wayne Enterprises brought his company and promoted him to director. So, like, he's living a great life. He's stopping crime, he's earning money, like, good money. And then he figures out a way to possibly help Clifford. He believes that if he gets the Thinker's thinking cap, that might be able to help regress the tumor and lengthen the Thinker's life, and possibly even just, like, allow it, like, not only would it lengthen his life, but also it would allow him to think of a way to cure the cancer, possibly. And so he could keep living. So he goes and he visits Johnny, Johnny Thunder, who was a character who had, like, a genie and a pen that he would use that would grant him any wishes he wanted. He's really old now, and he's starting to get, like, he has dementia, so he's starting to lose his memory. It's quite sad. Jay's asking him, like, where the thinking cap is, and Johnny just keeps changing the subject, and then he's just like, Jay, I don't know. I don't remember. And Jay's just like, it's fine, Johnny. You did a great job. You really helped me. You did your best. And Johnny's like, before you go, can you please take my dog? My dog's been under the weather lately, and I wondered if you might get a vet to take a look at him. I'd take him myself, but you know how it is. I'm not sure I can handle any more bad news. And Jay's just like, sure, Johnny. I know how it is. And so he takes Johnny's pen, which has the genie in it, away. And after dealing with the vet, he goes and fights the Golden Age Reverse Flash, which is apparently this android built by somebody in Belle Reve. Looks exactly like Jay Garrick, but with reverse Flash colors. And he goes and he teaches some kids about, stopping crime and stuff. And then he heads to a nearby cafe to have lunch with Nightwing, like with Dick Grayson and Wally West. And Jay talks to them about the fact that that, like, the new Justice League that is currently around is good, and that, like, they need a new Justice League because the Justice League has recently reunited. The one with Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and stuff, they've recently come together in the comics. It's only recently, like, just happened. I think Grant Morrison's run is about to start. It hasn't started yet, but I think it starts. I think it's the reason he ends up. It's the reason they end up leaving the Flash, is because they're busy writing Justice League. So a waiter comes over and says that Captain Cold is attacking the city because everyone like Wally's identity as the Flash is publicly known. So Wally is like, all right, I'll go stop it, and he goes to put on his Speed Force suit. And Jay is just like, nope, the doctor said that you need at least one more day to recover. I'll go deal with Captain Cold. And as he leaves, Jay pays the bill as well. And Nightwing's just like, did he pay the bill? And Wally's like, yep, that's what Jay does. We're always fighting to see who can put their credit card on the table first. And Nightwing's just like, man, that's who I want to be when I grow up. So it's kind of sweet seeing that Nightwing like looks up to people like Jay. So Jay goes and fights Captain Cold. Captain Cold doesn't get any substantial thing in this story. He just gets knocked out by Jay. He's been reduced to a villain who appears in a couple of panels. And then Sentinel, Alan Scott, shows up, and he's just like, Jay, like, sometimes I feel like I'm your father. Like, I'm the younger one out of the two of us, and yet you're the one that's full of energy and taking down, like, Captain Cold and stuff. Like, how do you do it? And Jay's just like, I think I just love doing this. I think that's all it is. There's nothing really miraculous about it. I think when you got super speed, you just live life in the fast lane, and that's all I can really say. So Jay goes and he does like an interview about the Flash and about his relationship with Joan, and then after that he goes and he visits Ted Knight to ask about, like, he goes to visit different members of the JSA to find out where the Thinker's Cap is. Ted Knight, who was the original Starman, he goes and visits Wildcat and Spectre, and eventually he comes back to Johnny Thunder, and Johnny's really angry because Jay gave him the wrong pen. He's like, how did you go to the vet and then come back with the wrong pen? And also, when did the Flash start wearing a vase? And he's referring to Jay's helmet, like his hat, and he's like, this isn't a vase, this is a hat. And then he looks at Johnny's flower vase, and it turns out that Johnny's vase isn't a vase, it's actually the Thinker's thinking cap. And he's like, Johnny. So he grabs the thinking cap, stops Captain Boomerang along the way, and makes it back to the hospital. He's like, I found the thinking cap, Johnny Thunder had it all along. And then the doctors are like, his heart couldn't take the strain, Mr. Garrick. He passed away a couple of minutes ago. I'm sorry. And we see Clifford's body, and Jay's just like... And Jay just goes like, well, I know for a fact that bodies, like, a brain can function for at least 10 minutes after they die. It's only been 2 minutes. Chances are Clifford could still get through this. So he puts the thinking cap on Clifford, and it works. He's like, good people always beat the odds. And Clifford's just like, son of a gun. What is it with you and saving people? And Jay's just like, you're back on maximum brain power. I thought you'd be pleased. And the way Clifford answers, he says, oh yeah, this is much nicer than heaven. Rescue everyone, and the world's going to get awfully crowded, Jay. I'm the smartest man alive at the moment, so I know what I'm talking about. And he takes the helmet off, and he says, learn to lose every once in a while. A little humility prepares you for what lies ahead. Incidentally, why didn't you tell me today was your... He's like, incidentally, why didn't you tell me today was your wedding anniversary? So he takes the helmet off, and, like, Clifford is willing to... Like, he's willing to die. Like, he thinks it's his time. And yeah, so the big reveal is that it's actually Joan and Jay's wedding anniversary, and that's why they're going to have dinner. And so Jay's 60 seconds late to their date. He shows up, and they start ordering their dinner, and they celebrate the fact that they've been together for 50 years. And he's like, well, here's to the next 150. Enjoy it before it forgets who you are. And they clink their glasses, and that's it. That's the end of the issue. A really great one-off story. You know, not every Flash issue needs to be some grand thing or need to be a part of, like, a big arc. You know, this one was just a really sweet story following Jay Garrick, like, following a day in the life of Jay Garrick. And I love Jay Garrick, so I'm always happy to see an issue all about him. You know, we don't get that very often. But the next issue that we're going to be talking about isn't a Flash issue. It's Green Lantern issue 96, because this is the beginning of a 3-part crossover story between Green Lantern, Green Arrow, which is Connor Hawke Green Arrow, the son of Oliver Queen, because Oliver Queen is dead, and the Flash. So yeah, next we're going to be talking about Green Lantern issue 96, part 1, 3 of a kind, part 1. So yeah, let's check it out. So, Green Lantern issue 96, written by Ron Mars with art by Paul Pelletier and John Lowe. The issue begins in Iraq, Specifically, is it Baghdad? I think it's Baghdad. There's attacks that are currently going down in Iraq, like in Baghdad, and it turns out that it's Heatwave, Sonar, who is a Green Lantern villain, and this villain called Hatchet, who was in a Green Lantern, Green Arrow crossover, and that's all he's been in. So they break into this place. Heatwave straight up roasts these two soldiers, and they just kill all these people. And they're there to get what is called a doomsday weapon. It's like it's like a big box with something in it, and they call it the doomsday weapon, so you assume it's going to be some big giant gun or some kind of bomb. So they steal that, and meanwhile, nobody knows that that's happening except for, like, the people, like, some people on the news are talking about it. But for whatever reason, like, I think the news is on in the JLA Watchtower, and Martian Manhunter doesn't even really pay attention to what's currently going on in Iraq. Maybe it's supposed to be commentary on the fact that there's always stuff going on around the world, and they just think of it as like, oh, it's not the superheroes' problem, that's for the army and stuff. They don't realize that supervillains are involved. No, what he's too busy focused on is the fact that Wally, Connor, and Kyle are going on a cruise together. Kyle's a bit late, and he shows up, and they head off to go on their cruise, and when they get to the cruise ship, it actually left already. It left without them. They missed it. And so Kyle's like, why don't we just fly over there? Like, why don't we just use our powers and get over there and, like, put our costumes on? And Wally's just like, no, we said no costumes. And Kyle's just like, all right, I'll just use my powers to get us over there instead. So he creates, like, a little hovercraft construct and gets them over to the ship. And when they get there, they meet this woman whose name is Julie. And Kyle uses, like, his sweet talk to get her to tell them where their rooms are, and then he tries to get with her. He's like, hey, why don't you take me on a personal tour? And she's like, I'm only into blondes. And she turns to Connor and she's like, try and find me later, and walks off, and they head off, and Connor doesn't really take notice of it, because Connor's not really interested in women. Connor's not really interested in anyone. I think eventually they would establish that he is gay, which is good. But at the same time, I always just wonder, like, it would have been great if he was just one of the first, like, asexual characters, or just, like, somebody who just had no interest at all, because you don't see that very often, and that's kind of how he was pictured at first. So yeah, they head off to their room, and Kyle starts thinking about life. He's thinking about Donna, because they're currently going through a thing, because her family's dead. I've talked about it before. And then Wally comes in, and he asks Kyle about Jade, because Kyle's living with Jade, and Kyle's like, oh, you're asking if, like, we're dating or something, like, if it's gone any further than that. And my answer is no. I consider Jade to be a really good friend. I don't want to ruin our friendship, and I also don't want Alan Scott to be my dad, because that's weird. I don't want the original Green Lantern to become my girlfriend's dad, you know? And then he asks Wally about Linda, and he's like, I've said it a million times, I'll say it again, I love Linda, and I've been through so many situations. I've been literally to hell and back, and Linda's always waited for me, so yeah, I love Linda more than anything. Anyway, let's go get a drink in the bar. Like, Connor doesn't even really get to talk in that conversation. He's just busy, kind of like, I think the whole time the girls are kind of like hitting on Connor, and he's just, like, girls on the ship are kind of like hitting on Connor, and Connor's just not doing anything about it. So they head to the lounge to get a drink, and while they're in there, a guy comes up to Kyle and is like, hey, you're sitting in our seats. And it's very clear that it is Hatchet, Heatwave, and Sonar all wearing disguises. But when he's not wearing his costume, Heatwave just straight up, like Mick Rory just straight up looks like Lex Luthor. What I find hilarious is that they don't realize that it's Sonar, even though Sonar, this version that was introduced in Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern, he has metal all over his face. Like, literally 60% of his face has metal on it, and all he's doing to hide it is wearing it, like, is to wear a hat. So you would think that Kyle would see him and instantly recognize him, but nah, Kyle's stupid, so he doesn't recognize him. So they decide to give their seats up to the guys, and that's when these villains realize that they are Green Lantern, Flash, and Green Arrow, because was it like Sonar saw the Green Lantern ring that Kyle had? Because Kyle just wears it out and about, so it's just easy for villains to know he's a Green Lantern. And Heatwave recognizes that Kyle called Wally Wally, and he knows that Wally West is the Flash. So because they now know that the Flash, Green Arrow, and Green Lantern are on the ship, they decide to try and take over the ship. They take the captain hostage in order to get away. And that's when Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and Flash show up, because they also figured out that the three villains are Hatchet, Sonar, and Heatwave. So they show up, and a big fight breaks out on the ship, and Sonar manages to overpower Kyle using his sonar powers. He's like, your friend's head is ringing. I'm about to blow a ship, like a hole in this ship, unless you let us go. Let us go or I'll blow a hole in this ship. What's it gonna be, heroes? And they're just like, alright, you win. They're good boys. Love that protect the innocent mindset you got. Looks like this will work out just fine after all. Hatchet, why don't you go to the hold and check on the package? Make sure these three didn't have a chance to get at it. And he's like, yeah, you keep an eye on them. And so Hatchet goes and checks on the Doomsday weapon. And that's when it's revealed that the Doomsday weapon isn't just a weapon. It's a person. And that person is Dr. Polaris, the Green Lantern villain. Basically DC's Magneto. Not as deep a character as Magneto, but he has the same powers as Magneto, magnetism. Still an interesting character, though. He used to have multiple personalities. I talked about him in Underworld Unleashed. He used to have multiple personalities, and then he sold his soul to the devil to get rid of his multiple personalities so that he could just be a villain, because he used to have a good side and a bad side, like Two-Face. And then he just decided to get rid of his good side so that he could just continue being a villain, because that's what he wanted to do. And so, yeah, this Doomsday weapon is Dr. Polaris. And so we'll find out what happens in the next issue, which is going to be Green Arrow issue 130. Three of a Kind, Part 2. So Green Arrow issue 130, written by Chuck Dixon, with art by Will Rosado and Sal Buscema. Sonar is going crazy on the deck of the ship, terrorizing everyone, and Heatwave's just like, calm the heck down. We gotta get Polaris to the North Pole, and in order to do that, we gotta make sure we don't destroy the ship, which is exactly what you're doing. We need it to get there. Why do we have to take Polaris to the North Pole? Because he's powered by magnetism, so if we take him there, we'll give him a jump start, hopefully knocking him out of his coma. He'll be grateful to us and reward us or something. That's their plan, to try and awaken Dr. Polaris by taking him to the North Pole and hoping that he'll be grateful to them. So Hatchet has Kyle, Wally, and Connor all held hostage, and he's just busy drinking and yapping to them, keeping an eye on them. Kyle says he has a plan in order to get them out of this. He creates a little toy truck to go and spy on Heatwave and Sonar, who happen to be talking about their entire plan. So he learns what they're planning to do. He learns about Polaris, and so the character whose name was what was her name? I can't remember her name. Julie. Yeah, Julie, the woman that they met on the ship. I almost forgot what her name was because she looks nothing like she did in the Green Lantern issue. She's got brown hair in this Green Arrow issue. Completely different eye color. She's wearing completely different clothes. She's not the same character. She looks more like Iris. Yeah, so she comes in and offers a drink to Hatchet, and that distracts Hatchet long enough so that Kyle can create Green Lantern construct versions of him and his friends, so that Flash, because he turns around and he's like, what the heck? And then Flash is like, ugh, and like runs in and punches him out, and Kyle and Connor get away in order to confront Sonar. So they see Sonar using his sound abilities, and Kyle tries to create a barrier to protect him and Connor, including like little construct like headphones, which is really fun. And so Sonar blasts them with his sound powers, and Kyle is like, I'll handle Sonar, you go after Heatwave and try and stop him from freeing Dr. Polaris. Meanwhile, Wally tries to get all of the people evacuated off the ship, because there's a good chance that the ship is probably going to crash, and they don't want all of the citizens being on it, because they're probably going to die. Heatwave is down in the bottom where all of the cargo and stuff is, and Connor shows up and beats the crap out of him. Meanwhile, Kyle gets wailed on by sound, and Wally grabs a bunch of life vests for all of the people on the ship in order to get him off of it. But before he can do that, Heatwave, his heat gun gets knocked out of his hand by Connor, and the gun causes a massive fire, which deactivates the it like melts the containment that Dr. Polaris is in, the box that he's locked in. And Hatchet gets really upset that Wally beat him up and made a fool out of him. So he makes a giant gun and he blasts a hole straight through the bottom of the ship, which is not good. Sonar almost kills Kyle, but Kyle turns his own sound powers against him by creating a construct bell around him, and so Sonar fries himself with his own sound powers. He doesn't die, but the sound causes his like robotic parts to fry, so he gets knocked out. And yeah, there's a giant hole in the ship, so the ship starts sinking, and Wally's just like, oh, and Kyle's like, no. And Heatwave's just like, we're gonna drown like lemmings. He's like, ah, and Connor's just like, all the passengers, they'll die because of you. And then a voice says, no, and grabs Connor from behind. He's like, they will indeed die. I must correct you, young man. But it will be at my hand. And it turns out that it's Dr. Polaris. He's come out of his coma, and Connor is not in a good situation. You know, he's got Connor from the back of the neck, and he's probably going to kill Connor and try and kill everyone on the ship. How are they going to defeat Dr. Polaris? Well, we'll have to find out in The Flash, issue 135, part 3, the final part of Three of a Kind. Alright, so The Flash, issue 135. Obviously written by Grant Morrison, Mark Millar, with art by Paul Ryan and John Nyberg. Grant Morrison and Mark Millar decided to take an interesting turn with this one by having most of the story take place in a court. Like, you would think it would take place right after the events that just happened, but instead we are told those events through the courthouse in flashbacks when Wally and Kyle, and it's off panel, we don't get to see it, but it's assumed that Connor gave a testimony as well and answered questions and stuff. So most of this issue is just courtroom stuff, them asking the questions and that about like what happened. confirming exactly why the three villains were there, which was to get Polaris and take him to the North Pole in order to revive him, and that the reason they were doing it was because they were hoping that Dr. Polaris would be thankful to them and that he would become their leader and help them get money, etc., etc. Basically, what their defendant is trying to prove is that the three villains, weren't responsible for the deaths. Like, there's no proof that they were responsible for these deaths, even though Hatchet was the one who blew a hole in the ship that put everyone's lives in danger anyway. He's trying to say that, like, it was Dr. Polaris that killed people, not them. And they weren't responsible for Dr. Polaris getting out. That was just a complete accident. You know, they weren't, even though they were trying to free him, which still directly connects them to it. So even if it wasn't direct murder, it would be like third degree murder, I guess, for the three villains, because they were responsible. Like, their actions caused the deaths of a lot of people. So they would still be, like, that, they would still be charged with, like, third degree murder or whatever it's called, second degree murder, one of those. So Green Lantern comes up to the podium and he's asked some questions about what happened on the day. And Green Lantern talks about the fact that, Kyle Rayner. Kyle talks about the fact that as soon as Dr. Polaris woke up, he destroyed the entire ship in seconds. He obliterated it. He just completely pulled it apart. That's how powerful he is. You know, some people say that, like, there's this kind of argument of, like, who's more powerful, Dr. Polaris or Magneto? But the real answer is that it can really be either of them, because you can make them as strong as you want. You know, you can make Dr. Polaris as strong as Magneto. There just hasn't been a lot of reasons for writers to do that, because Dr. Polaris isn't a main villain like Magneto is. Like, if Dr. Polaris was Green Lantern's arch nemesis, he would be as strong as Magneto. But he's not. He's just a member of the Rogues Gallery, so he's never going to be as strong as Magneto, because he's never in that kind of situation of power as the main villain of an arc or whatever. Like, he's never been the main villain of a story longer than this. So their goal is to not stop Polaris. Like, that is one of their goals, but their main goal is to save as many people as possible, because the ship's been torn apart, everyone's in the ocean, they're gonna die of frostbite if they don't do something. So Wally just straight away starts grabbing people and bringing them to the closest land, which is ice. Sonar uses his powers against Kyle, which causes him to lose focus while he's trying to save people. And a good shot from Connor manages to put Sonar out of commission, allowing Kyle to continue saving people. They have Star Labs come up the podium and they say that they didn't even know that Dr. Polaris was still alive when they found him and put him in the box that he was found in. He was wrapped up in a ton of metal, like almost like tinfoil, and they assumed that he was dead, but it turned out that he wasn't. Wally faces Polaris, and using his expertise on magnetism, he hits Polaris with kinetic energy, which, when you hit a magnet with kinetic energy, it causes, you know, everything to come towards it, like be attracted to it much more, or whatever. Like, it increases its radius of magnetism, and so Dr. Polaris, just like a crap ton of metal and stuff, just like flies into him, and we don't actually get to find out what happened to him. It's like, did he die? Did he get hospitalized and he's been put away? They don't really answer that. Like, Grant Morrison or Mark Millar don't really answer that. We kind of just move on, where it's just like, Wally beat Dr. Polaris off panel, maybe killed him, we don't know. But that doesn't matter, because Kyle is, like, saving people. He creates a giant construct of a Baywatch woman and saves all these people from the ocean. And then the defendant of the three villains is like, I was saving this until the very end, but these guys were working for the military on like a top secret covert operation. They were getting Polaris away from like a warring country, so they are exempt of all charges. And so they almost get away scot-free. But then Connor points out that he's pretty sure that there's something in there's something about this case. There's like a loophole in it, and Wally manages to find that loophole, like that argument against the defendant for the villains, by reading all the books really fast. And it turns out this is how they figured it out. The Alaskan state attorney has the power to overhaul a military court. And so because the people died in Alaskan waters, and that like this whole situation happened in Alaska, it meant that the Alaskan court was able to just overrule it. And so, Sonar, Hatchet, and Heatwave lost the case, and they get to go to prison. And that's how they win the court case. And so everything's all good, everything's happy, you know, they all go home, have a nice little chat with Linda about how they solved the case. And then Connor and Kyle say goodbye to Wally and they head off. And that's the end of that story. But it's not the end of that issue. Because in space, something announces that it's targeting Keystone City. And it crashes into Earth. Like, it just crashes straight into Keystone City. And it's this person who refers to themselves as G-Force, stating that, and he says to, like, the cops, he's like, tell the Flash even G-Force wasn't fast enough to save his home world from destruction. Now it's his turn. The Flash must win the ultimate race or Earth dies too. And we're left on that little cliffhanger. So who is G-Force? What is he talking about? We'll find out in issue 136, the first part of The Human Race, which I have heard is the greatest Flash story of all time. I hear many people say that this is like better than any story that Mark Waid or Jeff Johns had written, or like any other writer had written. So looking forward to reading this and seeing if that's true. Alright, issue 136, The Human Race Part 1. We begin with a flashback that'll be very important to this overall story. It is revealed that as he was a child, Wally West had a invisible friend named Crackle who he used to talk through the radio. He would dial it until he could talk to Crackle. We only know about this because Wally himself somehow appears in the past. We'll find out how later. He talks about how he's using something known as the alien accelerator, and that this is a side effect of it, is that he's seeing himself in the past talking to Crackle. And then we actually come to the present, where Wally has found G-Force, and they're talking about how, like, G-Force said something about an ultimate race, and then they realize that G-Force has died. His heart has literally disintegrated because he ran so much. He ran until his heart disintegrated, which is kind of messed up. And then these two alien beings show up, whose names we don't know, but they have giant metal floating chairs. They show up, and they're basically just like, the last racer lost, so we've come to Earth to find a new champion, and your champion is going to race against our champion that we've picked, and whoever loses, their planet gets destroyed. And Wally's just kind of like, well, I'm the fastest person on Earth, so it's obviously going to have to be me. And Linda's just like, well, make sure you come back. And Wally's like, I always come back. I always come back to you. They get the JLA involved as well, and Wally's just like, there's not really anything we can do. It's not like you can go and attack them. they'll destroy us. They said if we try and stop this race, we'll all die. So I have no choice but to take part in this. G-Force took part in the race previously. He died. His entire world was destroyed. So Wally puts on the alien accelerator and he runs straight into this portal that the aliens have summoned that he has to travel to in order to meet his opponent. So he runs at super speed through it and eventually lands on this other planet that is inhabited by robotic camera people, which I guess are to watch the race and record it and stuff. And that's when Wally finds out who his opponent is going to be for this ultimate race. It's Crackle. Crackle is a real thing. Kind of looks like if you imagined Sonic the Hedgehog, but he's made entirely out of electricity. That's what Crackle looks like. I feel like the best way I could explain Crackle looking like is that he kind of looks like, it's like Sonic the Hedgehog or like Casper, the friendly ghost, that kind of like chibi look, but made out of electricity. So, Wally realizes that his opponent is his imaginary friend. He's like, you're racing me against my imaginary friend? That's horrible, because either I die and I lose, either I die and I lose my entire world, or he dies and I lose my imaginary friend, and my imaginary friend loses his world, which is a radio frequency. It's also revealed that America's nuclear weapons have been shut down, so they can't even attack the aliens with nuclear weapons. And that's when Wally finds out what this race even is. They're not racing to anywhere. There's no end goal. It's just to see who lasts the longest. So whoever can run the longest, like whoever dies first, loses. That's basically what it is. They run until they die. And whoever dies first loses. And so far, Crackle has faced 6 champions, 6 speedsters throughout the universe, and he has beaten all of them. They've all died. The last one he faced was G-Force. Before that, he faced a woman known as Lumina, who drowned in these crystal waters, which sounds pretty horrifying. And Crackle mentions that when he faced Lumina, that was the only time he actually came close to dying and losing. And so, Wally has no choice but to face Crackle in this race, and they begin their race. They start running, accelerating at light speed, and Wally and Crackle have to run straight into a black hole. And Wally's just like, I have an idea. Sure, I'm running into a collapsing star with the fate of the whole human race on my shoulders, and Crackle's gaining. And so we're left at the end of the issue with Wally heading straight into a black hole, barely ahead of Crackle, and we'll find out what happens next. Alright, so issue 137, we have a new artist, Ron Wagner. The ultimate race between Wally and Crackle has begun, their first challenge, running through a black hole. And Wally knows that the only way he's going to be able to run through a black hole without dying is running at the speed of light, because, running beyond the speed of light, because, as far as we know, black holes can only absorb anything up to and including light. So if you go beyond it, a black hole wouldn't affect you and you'd be able to run through it. That's the logic we're using. Makes sense, I guess. But by doing this, he's risking being absorbed by the speed force, but he's got to do it anyway. And Crackle can't run at this speed, and Wally doesn't want Crackle to die, so he kind of brings Crackle with him by giving him some of his speed force energy. And while they're running through the black hole, Wally starts colliding with the speed force, and he's just like, ah, because touching the speed force is absorbing his arm, and Wally gets pulled into the speed force, and Jay is Linda's just he's gone, and Jay's just don't bet on it, sweetheart. I've been in enough tight spots like this to know it ain't over till the fat lady sings. And Max is just Jay, you don't understand. This isn't like the street fight with Cobra or anything you and I have encountered in more than half a century behind these little masks. It really is over. And it's not over because Crackle reaches into the speed force, because he's made out of radio frequencies, so he doesn't get affected by it, and grabs Wally and pulls him out. And Linda is any minute now, he's gonna say something any minute. And he does. Wally's just like, Linda. And he's just like, we're alive. We've ended up on some kind of planet that seems to be prehistoric. And there are prehistoric versions of the Guardians on this planet, like back when they were first born as like these caveman-looking guys. And it's the first ever trap in the universe. So they've trapped this giant dinosaur. It's the first time anyone has ever made a trap. And right after this, Crackle says, right after this, they're going to come up with a crude way of space travel. So they're going to invent space travel. And he's like, it's really weird seeing that this is where the Guardians began and where they would end up. And Crackle's like, and it's also sad what happened to them. Because as we know, the Guardians are all dead except for Ganthet. He's the only Guardian left alive. So, Wally, 5 days later, Wally has been racing for 5 days. He's been traveling in and out of dimensions. He's lost track of Crackle. And Jay and Linda are on the other end of his receiver, talking to him, trying to keep him going. Jay's making sure that Wally knows that Linda's okay. And Wally's just like, the situation isn't good though. Like, don't you understand? Like, we've lost regardless. If I beat Crackle, the Gamblers, which is the name of these two aliens, I didn't realize that that was their species name. I just thought that they were like, oh, we are gamblers, like that's just what we do. But no, they were literally stating what their species is. They're called the Gamblers. It's like the Gamblers are just going to take whoever wins, be it me or Crackle, and force us to race somebody else. And they're going to keep doing it until we die. So there's no winning. You know, even if I win, I'm just going to have to do another race against somebody else. And Jay manages to convince Wally to just keep going anyway because the JLA are trying to find a way to pull through this, find a loophole or something that'll help stop the Gamblers. So Wally travels through the destruction of Krypton as it happens because he's traveling through time and space. He travels through planets completely made out of gas. And it's at this point that Wally is just like, because Jay is just like, Wally, listen to me. The best minds in the world are working on this under direct instructions from the Justice League. It's only a matter of time before, and Wally's just like, time? You don't know the meaning of the word. It's always just a matter of time. I'll let you into a little secret, Jay. Time for Earth just ran. Oof. And Wally just collapses, and the Gamblers are like, you have forfeit the race, you have lost. I win. The race is over for the moment. Now the forfeit must be paid. And Linda talks to Wally. She's like, Wally, do you remember what happened when Superman offered to run in the race? Do you remember why the Secretary General turned him down? Or Jesse Quick? Or Max Mercury? Or all of them? It's because you're Wally West. You are the Flash. You're the fastest man alive. And that gives Wally the energy to get up and keep pushing. He's like, and then some, baby. And then some. And so he keeps running. And day 10 of running in the ultimate race, while he finds himself on one of the smallest planets in the universe, he doesn't want to stay there too long because he's afraid that he'll breathe in their entire atmosphere. But it's like a little pit stop that he's allowed to have. And Crackle is on the same planet. And he comes over and they talk to each other about how it's less scary what they're going through when they're going through it together. And they've basically come to a point where they're both thinking about just giving up and having both of their planets die because they'd rather both die than force the other one to die and lose their planet. And the Gamblers are just like, you better start racing or we're gonna blow up your planets. And then Crackle is like, Wally, I have a confession to make. Please don't be angry with me, Wally. I was only trying to save my world like you. There's something I haven't told you. Something important. And Wally's just like, what do you mean? And Crackle's like, there's a reason I've been beating my opponents. Oh, Wally, I feel so ashamed. And we don't get to find out what Crackle's reason is. But he tells Wally off panel. And so Wally asks Linda to get him a way to broadcast himself to the entire world. And so Wally broadcasts himself to everyone through every language. And he's like, people of Earth, I've arranged for this message to be broadcast in all languages in every nation because what you're about to hear will literally make the difference between living and dying. Here's what you have to do. And it ends on that cliffhanger. So we'll find out in the next issue, in the final part of the human race, what is Wally's plan to save Earth, and how does it involve every single living person on Earth? So issue 138, Wally's plan is to get Linda to get everyone in the world to essentially run with him as he tries to win this ultimate race. This isn't his main plan. This is just part of it. This is kind of just a bit of a morale boost for him, knowing that everyone's running behind him on Earth, you know? Kind of trying to, like, doing it alongside with him, doing the race alongside him. So Crackle and Wally go and visit the gamblers, and they just stop racing, and the gamblers are like, well, you forfeited the race, so I win, your world is going to be destroyed. And Wally is like, nah, that's not going to happen. We're not playing by your rules anymore. I am challenging you to a race because you're both gamblers and you can't help but take on a bet. So I bet that I can get to Earth before you can, even with your instantaneous travel. And if I get to Earth first, you spare Earth. And the gamblers are just like, well, his planet still dies. Like, Crackle's planet will still die, but we will promise to spare Earth if you beat us. But you won't, because you can't beat instantaneous travel. So the race between the gamblers and Wally begins. The gamblers and the Flash. So Wally is like, because Crack was like, maybe you're not as clever as I thought, Wally. And Wally's just like, just trust me, okay? This is going to work out beautifully. Linda, I need the whole world to start moving the second I give the word. Are you ready? Are you reading me okay, sweetheart? And she's like, loud and clear, Mr. West. Okay, everybody, this is the big one. On your marks, get set, go! And everyone in the entire world starts running. And then Wally starts running he starts racing the gambler. And Crackle is like, Wally, we gotta come to terms with this. You're not gonna be fast enough to beat the gamblers. You don't have enough energy. I'm going to give you all of my energy and sacrifice myself. I'm gonna kill myself, give you all of my energy, and you are gonna beat the gamblers. And Wally's like, what? No! And Crackle destroys himself and gives all of his energy to Wally. And he's like, tell my kids, tell my little children how much I'm going to. And he's just like, and fizzles out of existence. And Wally, grief-stricken with the loss of his imaginary friend, is given the motivation that he needs to continue pushing and to win. He tells the 5 fastest people other than himself to begin racing around the world. Superman, Jay Garrick, Impulse, Max Mercury, and Jesse Quick. And so they all start racing, and everyone around the world is running, and Wally is pushing himself, and he's talking about Linda. He's like, I can't hear Linda anymore. I'm in no place, no time, and with no other purpose except keeping track of the signal heading straight for the earpiece of the girl I do this for. And she's like, Wally, where are you? I've lost contact. And Wally's thinking to himself, God alone knows how much I want to marry her. And so Wally continues racing, and he makes it to Earth before the gamblers do. And he has so much time that he starts changing the radio frequencies. That's right, he's already on Earth. He's won. Wally's won. That's how fast he was. He got here before we even got to the end of the issue. So he's on Earth. He starts changing the radio frequencies, and the gambler shows up, and Wally's like, what took you so long? The gambler's like, we lost. All right, we lost. You won somehow. We will spare Earth, but Crackle's planet is going to be destroyed. And Wally's like, that's fine with me. You said you'd keep Earth safe? Go away. And the gambler's like, alright, and he leaves. And Earth is spared, Wally wins, and then Linda's like, but how did you save 2 worlds? Also, Wally makes a funny joke earlier when he first gets to Earth, he's still running at super speed, and he's like, God, I really want to kiss Linda, but if I do, she'll probably explode at the speed that I'm running. And then at the end of the issue, Linda goes to hug Wally, And Wally's just like, maybe you should wait until my suit cools down, because if you touch me, you're probably going to explode. And that's when Linda's like, what did you... Like, you said you had a plan to save both Earths, like, both worlds. How were you going to do that? And Wally says, well, I changed the radio frequency of Crackle's home planet so that it's on our planet, so the gamblers won't be able to find his world to destroy it, because it's on Earth, and they can't destroy Earth. So we've saved Crackle's world from being destroyed. And Linda's just like, Wally West, you've saved the world and got the girl, but you seem to be taking an awful long time to actually kiss her for a guy who claims to be the fastest man alive. And Wally's like, baby, after everything I've been through, it's a pleasure just to take my time and make the moment last. Close your eyes. And Linda and Wally kiss, and it's broadcast on a massive screen. And that's when it's revealed that Wally was telling this entire story to a class of children. He says that he went there to talk about road safety, and he got sidetracked and started talking about this story. And then the teacher is like, thanks for coming and talking to the children. They really loved your story. Would you like to have a photo with us? And Wally's... Yeah, she's like, do you want to take a photo with us? And Wally's like, yeah, of course, I'd love to take a photo with you and the children. And so they all take a class photo, and he's like, well, I guess I better get back to work. Thanks for having me, kids. And he runs away, and then one of the kids is like, miss, there's like a weird thumbprint on the photo. And she's like, what are you talking about, Sarah? I don't make mistakes when I take photos. It's probably just your thumbprint. And she's like, it could be, Miss Kane. And they look at the photo, and there's a weird shadowy figure standing behind Wally. It kind of looks like the Flash, but it's black, and it's got like a skull face. Yeah, so I don't know what that's about. But in the next issue, we're dealing with the Black Flash. And this was actually Grant Morrison's final Flash issue, so we're saying goodbye to Grant Morrison. And but Mark Millar is going to be continuing on as we begin the Black Flash Part 1. Really looking forward to reading this, because everyone knows about the Black Flash. It's one of the most well-known Flash characters of all time, because the idea of a Grim Reaper but for speedsters is one of the coolest concepts that DC has ever, like, that anyone has ever come up with. You know, and it makes sense that Grant Morrison and Mark Millar would be the ones to come up with this kind of context. So, this kind of concept. So yeah, let's get straight into The Black Flash Part 1, which is The Flash issue 139, written by Mark Millar, with art by Popman and Chris Ivey. So, issue 139, we begin with the Wests, and like the Flash family, having a family picnic, and it's to celebrate Iris's wedding anniversary. Oh yeah, by the way, the art is being done by Popman now. Sorry, almost forgot to mention that. And Chris Ivey. The only problem I have with this art is the design for Impulse. I think it's the worst Bart has ever looked, honestly. He's got a shaved head, which I really do not like at all. And his facial features and everything are just really off. He just doesn't look... He looks really ugly. But everyone else looks fine. So yeah, they're having this whole celebration, and Iris said that, like, she's sorry that she's such a recluse, but because she's from the future, she's just worried every time she has a glass of wine, she's going to accidentally spoil things from the future. So they have a big group photo that Max takes, and he looks at the photo, and you can tell something's up with the photo that he's looked at, but he's kind of like, you know, hiding it away. Linda tells Wally to meet her at the Flash Museum after he's done, you know, going out being the Flash and stuff. And he promises to meet her there and that he's not going to be late. He's always on time. And Jay and Wally have a little bit of a conversation, and Jay says, like, when are you gonna propose to her? It's about time you got married. And Wally's like, look, I got all the time in the world. I'm the Flash. And Max is looking at a photo, and Jay comes up behind him, and he's like, we got our whole lives ahead of us, Jay. Oh, wait, no. It's Wally, sorry. He's like, we got our whole lives ahead of us, Jay. Who knows what the future holds, right, Max? Max? And Max is looking at a photo, and he's like, sure, Wally, whatever you say. We don't get to see what's in the photo, but there's something about the photo that's off. And if you listen to the last issue, you can probably guess what it already is. Jay is in San Francisco, which is currently where he spends a lot of his time. Like, he still spends time in Keystone City saving it, but right now he's in San Francisco. Wally shows up, and they run together. They stop a guy with a gun who almost hits a kid eating... Like, he almost shoots a kid eating ice cream, and Wally grabs the bullet. And, yeah, Wally basically tells Jay, like... about, like, proposing to Linda. Like, do you even think that's a good idea? You know, Barry and Iris got married, and as soon as they got married, her life was in danger all the time, to the point where she straight up died, or at least we thought she died. I don't want Linda to be in that kind of danger. And Jay's just like, meaning what? You're gonna cut yourself off from everyone and stay at home waiting for Vandal Savage? And Wally's like, so, you think I've done the right thing? And Jay's just like, depends what you've done. And Wally's like, I bought an engagement ring and 3 minutes ago, and I'm proposing to Linda tonight over dinner. Jay's just like, you what? And Wally's like, doing that race, the cosmic race, made me realize the things that I want in life, and that my chances of, like, I don't know how long I'm going to be alive for, but I know that the remaining time I had, I want it to be spending the rest of my life with Linda. And Jay's just like, best of luck. Can't argue with that, son. And then Wally realizes that it's snowing in San Francisco, and he's like, when was the last time it snowed in San Francisco? And Jay's just like, wait, do you mean by the year? And Wally's like, it's a rhetorical question. I'm just asking because back at the house it started raining randomly, which isn't normal. So Wally starts running around different places, and he realizes that the weather's kind of off. So he calls Oracle and asks her if she has noticed anything weird. And that's when Barbara says that she's found what she believes to be the weather wizard in the middle of a desert, causing lightning storms and stuff. So he's obviously the one causing the erratic weather. Wally goes out to stop the weather wizard. And he's like, no, you idiot! And Wally smashes him in the face and breaks his nose. Meanwhile, Max comes to see Jesse. He's like, hey, Jesse, I need your help with something. I took a photo of Wally back at the barbecue, and I think he's gonna die. Can you see in this photo, do you see that blur on the photo? That weird smudge? It was behind Barry Allen in the last photo he ever took, and it was also behind your father in the last photo he ever took. We believe that Wally is going to die. This thing goes by different names, but we've come to know it as the Black Flash. You know, this is probably something we shouldn't even be interfering with, but I can't stand back and watch Wally die without at least warning him about this. I understand if you don't want to get involved. And Jesse's just like, Max, I'm insulted. And she says her formula, and she puts her costume on, and she's like, alright, something more important just came up. Put all my meetings on hold. So Wally goes and sees Weather Wizard and breaks his nose. And Weather Wizard gets really pissed at him because he was like, Wally, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to grow shit in the desert. I was trying to make a capable environment in the desert for food and stuff. And Wally's like, why are you doing that? Like, aren't you a criminal? He's like, not anymore. I went to hell. Literal hell. And I don't ever want to go back there again. So I'm trying to do good things now. But you've ruined everything. You broke my wand. I can't do it anymore. So Wally's like, crap. Well, that sucks. Anyway, you were still, messing things up. Try and be good in a different way. And so he leaves. And as Wally is running to go and meet Linda at the Flash Museum, he gets tackled by Jessie. He's like, what the hell? Jessie, have you lost your mind? she's like, tell him why we're here, Max. And Max shows up and he's like, actually, Jesse, I'm not sure I can. The blur we saw behind in the photograph seems to have gone. Wally's just like, what are you talking about? He's like, back up a little here. Would you somebody mind explaining to me what this is all about? Max is just like, in a nutshell, the specter of death was hanging over you this afternoon and now he's disappeared. Maybe whatever you were planning to do next should have killed you and we interrupted. And Wally's just like, I was just gonna meet Linda. Like, I was gonna engage, like, I was gonna propose to her at the Flash Museum. And then the three of them kind of stop talking. And it's really cool. They're three shadows. I didn't notice this until now. I didn't notice this the first time I read this. But until now, their three shadows form a black silhouette of a Flash with claws, which is really cool. That, like, the black Flash is in their shadows formed together. So cool. So Linda's waiting at the Flash Museum, and she's just like, Wally, you said you weren't going to be late. You're 30 seconds late. And that's when lightning strikes down on Linda, and the black Flash appears in her eye. And Wally's just like, ah! And he gets there too late, and he finds a pile of ash, and he's just like, Linda! And that's where issue 139 ends. So we're left on that cliffhanger. Is Linda dead? We're going to have to find out in the next issue. Okay, so issue 140 starts off immediately with the reveal that Linda is alive, saved by Jay Garrick, who just happened to be able to get there in time. And Wally's just like, don't ever scare me like that again. And Linda's just like, as if I'd let 1,000,000 volts of electricity come between me and the romance of the century. And Wally's like, speaking of romance, I got something I need to tell you. And Linda's like, what are you doing? And Wally's like, 4 words. I've got 4 words I need to tell you. You can probably guess what those 4 words are. And off panel, he asks her to marry him. And they get married. And Wally mentions how the Secret Society of Villains tried to crash the wedding. But Superman and Martian Manhunter took them down. Linda and Wally went on their honeymoon. And the first week was messed up by the Mirror Master, who placed them in a mirror world where they hated each other. But the second week was okay. And then Linda gets pregnant. And reveals that she's going to have kids and that they're going to be out in 9 minutes because they have super speed, just like Wally. And Wally has triplets. And then they fight a group of supervillain kids because his rogues had kids. And so they created like a little team of supervillain babies. And then the Pied Piper became a villain again and tried to steal Wally's children. And then over the years, the boys lost their memories and powers, turned evil, turned blue, transformed into the 3 classic Universal horror monsters, and even turned into wasps. We fought the Nuclear Family, the Sixth Continent, the Scoutmaster and Roy, plus Ra's al Ghul, before foiling Barry Grodd's attempt to stop Linda from running for Congress. Mr. and Mrs. Flash lived happily ever after, and nothing ever happened that we couldn't deal with, until one day, Linda made a terrible confession. I really did die when that lightning bolt hit me, Wally. You were too late. I'm sorry. And so it's revealed that Linda did in fact die. And that everything we just saw was... I like to imagine it's Wally trying to get away from what actually happened and live in a fake, like kind of dream about what it could have been like. When in reality, he's actually at Linda's funeral with all of his superhero friends, and Wally is miserable. Like, he's miserable. He is, like, you're not supposed to enjoy being at a funeral, but he hates the fact that he's there. He hates all the guests that were invited. He hates the fact that all of his superhero friends couldn't even show up as who they are. They had to show up in their costumes. He is the only superhero at this funeral just wearing a suit. Nobody else could bother showing up in a suit. They all showed up in their costumes, hiding their secret identities. Wally says, like, you know, maybe it is time for me to grow up and stop hanging around with these superheroes who clearly don't care enough, because they don't care enough to even show their faces at this funeral. Batman didn't show up because he never shows up to stuff like this. Superman says it's because Batman has, like, issues with funerals, but, like, you still show up for a funeral for someone that you consider a friend. Some of the villains say that they're not going to do any crimes for Wally, so that he feels a bit better. Piper said he contacted the Secret Society to tell them to just take a break from crime for the next few days. And Weather Wizard is like, man, Wally's really sad. Like, really sad. Maybe I should heat up the air a little bit and make him feel a little bit warmer. And Wally is talking about the fact that, like, he's just like, none of these people knew Linda. Not really. None of them did. Linda was different. She wasn't from the future. She didn't have superpowers. She was just an ordinary person, and that's what I loved about her. It was her ordinariness which made her so special to someone who spent his whole life surrounded by emerald archers and winged wonders. She was my anchor, but now she's gone. And none of these adults were sincere enough to take off their play suits and say goodbye. And we also find out that Wally no longer has his powers. After Linda's death, he's no longer connected to the Speed Force, so he's no longer the Flash. Because as we know, Linda was his connection to the Speed Force. And we always thought that that was just it wasn't an actual literal thing, but it turns out, no, she really is. And then Linda's mum and dad show up, and she just smacks Wally across the face. And she's like, you murdered my daughter! Bad enough you let her get frozen in ice and put her up against those terrorists, but now this, I told her this kind of thing happened to anyone who got close to you freaks, and they say you were going to ask her to marry you? We met you only once, but I... And her dad is just like, please, Lucille, we've said what we came to say. She's like, this isn't Linda Park's funeral. I don't see any of her friends here. Nobody's talking about what she accomplished. That girl came from somewhere, but does anyone out there care? The girlfriend of the Flash is dead. That's how her own channel is running the story, Mr. West. Her own channel. And it's just really sad. Like, this whole issue is really depressing, reading this. What's also sad is, I remember reading earlier issues of The Flash, and she's talking about how she's like, why aren't her friends here? And in earlier issues, it's kind of established that Linda doesn't really have friends. She's so committed to the Flash family and her job that she doesn't really have any friends. But she has, like, one friend that she went out to dinner with, and she wasn't even really close to anymore. Yeah. It's rough. So, a month goes by. Captain Boomerang is attacking Keystone City. Wally is no longer the Flash, so Jesse Quick has to stop him. He's strapped a boomerang, like a giant rocket boomerang, to Jay's back, hurtling him through the city. So Jesse manages to get the boomerang off, and Jay falls into the ocean where he finds a bomb that Boomerang has set off, and he manages to stop the bomb before it explodes. Jesse then goes and finds Wally at his house, and it's revealed that Wally is moving to Scotland. He's leaving. And Jesse's like, how could you leave? Like, I came here because I wanted to make sure you didn't leave the family. Like, we all love you. And, you know, being a superhero is useful. And Wally's just like, will you stop? Been acting like a kid my whole life, Jesse. But now Linda's dead, and suddenly it's not a game anymore. It's time to leave behind my little friends with their Halloween costumes and secret code names. I gotta grow up before someone else gets killed. It's as simple as that. And he says, like, I got a job in Scotland as a teacher. Like, it's all gonna be good. And Jesse's like, what's this? And Wally's like, it's the ring I was planning to propose with. He'll probably get more use out of it than I ever will. And he's like, Jesse? And Jessie starts crying because she doesn't realize. She didn't know that Wally was planning to propose to Linda, or it didn't really hit her until now. Like, she knew, but it didn't really hit her how much hurt Wally is feeling. She's like, oh God, I've just made a complete fool of myself. You must think I'm such an idiot. I'm sorry, Wally. It's just that I don't want to leave you. I don't want you to leave our little family. And Wally's just like, Jesse, please keep the ring. And then Jesse just runs away. He's like, oh, Jesse. So he heads to the airport, and everyone recognizes him as the Flash. And he's like, so much for traveling incognito. I wonder when they're gonna change this poster to Jay. And there's like a big poster of Wally as the Flash. And then a bunch of chains appear around him. And he's like, all right, Bart, can you get rid of these chains? And Impulse is like, sorry, it was the only thing I could think of at such short notice. So they go to grab something to eat, and before Wally says goodbye. And meanwhile, Max is tuning into like his zen, like he's meditating, and he feels a presence, and he thinks it's Linda, but it's not Linda. It's the Black Flash, and Linda Park isn't what it desired. And Max is like, it's coming back. Like Wally's in danger. So Wally and Bart go to eat some burgers, and for Bart that's like 30 burgers, and they talk about like their family and stuff, and Iris and things like that, and then all of a sudden Bart freezes, like stops moving, and everything around Wally just stops moving. And Max is just like, Wally, oh my god, get out of there. And Wally's just like, time has hit the brakes and I'm trapped here, powerless and alone. With the Black Flash standing before me, and we get to see the Black Flash for the first time, hauntingly standing in the room with Wally. And that's the end of the issue. And so next, we're going to be talking about the final part of The Black Flash, issue 141, and the final issue of the Grant Morrison and Mark Millar Flash run. And then after that, we're going to be talking about the Flash 80-page Giant Special and Flash Annual 11. So stick around for those if you want to listen to those. But yeah, issue 141. Let's go. Alright, so issue 141. Barry Allen is dead. Johnny Quick is dead. Even Savitar. None of them were able to outrun the Black Flash. Now he's coming for Wally. Wally's like, he's coming for me now. Instantly, Wally begins running away from the Black Flash as the Black Flash chases him through the airport. He manages to lose him for a second by donning a disguise, but the Black Flash sees through his disguise and almost gets him, but Jay saves Wally and locks him inside a room and is like, Wally, you're staying here because if the Black Flash touches you, you're dead, and we're going to do whatever we can to stop you from dying. So Jesse, Max, and we're going to try and distract the Black Flash, figure a way to beat him. You got to stay in here. And Wally's just like, Jay, you idiot, Jay! So Jay, Jesse, and Max team up against the Black Flash and are incredibly overwhelmed. Jay tries ramming a trolley into the Black Flash, sending him colliding with a truck which explodes, gravely injuring Jay, but not killing him. So Jay is out of the count, and the Black Flash just walks out of the explosion like nothing, because they can't hurt it. It's incorporeal. You can't touch it. So the best thing they could do is contain it somehow, incapacitate it in some way. Jesse's just like, Max? And she goes to chase the Black Flash, and Max just knocks her out. Just smacks her in the face and knocks her out. And then we see the legs of, like, Wally running, and Max is just like, sorry, Jesse, I can't let you do this. I can't let you put yourself in this kind of danger. I've lived a long life. I'm ready for whatever comes. And then Wally just zooms past the Black Flash, and Max is just like, Wally? And Wally's just like, let's boogie. Also, I forgot to mention, Wally has a soul patch at the moment that he grew out over the last month, and it sucks. I didn't talk about it because I didn't think it was worth mentioning, but I just can't stand looking at it. And I'm glad it's going to go away after this issue. So the Black Flash chases Wally across the entire planet. Wally has a plan to deal with the Black Flash. They start traveling through time millions and millions of years, to the point where Earth itself dies, and then, like, the solar system dies. Basically, Wally's plan is to run all the way to the beginning of time itself, before the Big Bang happened. Because at the beginning of time, you are literally out of time. The end of life, the universe, and everything, where death ceases to exist, even at a conceptual level. He's like, oh yeah, I'm good at this job. Hasta la vista, baby. And the Black Flash just disintegrates and ceases to exist, because death doesn't exist at the end of time. And so Wally has beaten death and the Black Flash. So when the Big Bang happens, he uses it to blast himself back through time. Wally's just like, there's no point going back in time, because I still don't have Linda. And Linda's all that matters to me. Like, I don't want to live without her a minute longer, and I don't intend to either. One way or another, we're going to be together again tonight. And so Jesse's just like, Jay's just like, Wally? And Jesse's like, it's all good. Like, Wally beat the Black Flash. He's fine. Like, he's gonna live. We did it. And Max is like, I don't think so, Jesse. I don't think Wally's coming back. He just went into the Speed Force. Like, into it. He's never coming back. Wally just committed suicide. And as he says this, Impulse shows up. Bart. And Bart's just like, no way! And Max is like, Bart, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were there. And he's like, you're wrong about this one, Max. Totally off base. Wally wouldn't do that in a million years. He's the Flash, don't you get it? He's the fastest man alive, the Scarlet Speedster, the Keystone Comet, the guy I want to be when I grow up. The Flash can do anything so long as you believe in him, and there's no way he's gonna die like this. Believe in him, Max. Just believe in him. And then a big crack happens, like a... and something whooshes by them, and it's Wally holding Linda Park. It turns out Wally did enter the Speed Force, but he only entered it to grab Linda and then come back out. So he grabs Linda, and she's like, Wally? And he's like, welcome home, honey. You miss me? And Bart's like, yoo! And Wally's just like, hey, I didn't know you cared, Bart. He's like, I mean, nice job, man. You're a real pro. And so Jesse takes Wally aside and is like, don't you have something that you should be saying to Linda now that she's alive? You know, before you miss your chance again? And so Wally takes Linda to her own grave. He's also shaved himself, by the way. He takes her to his own her own grave and tells her about how, like, Superman and Captain Marvel gave a speech to her. Al Gore was at her funeral, because he was vice president at the time, which kind of dates this. It's like, wow, Al Gore was at my funeral, and they had some wishy-washy reporter reporting at my funeral. And Wally's like, can we not talk about work? And if we could stop talking about work for a moment, there's something I want to ask you. And he brings out the ring, and Linda's like, oh my god, you're not going to do this in a graveyard, are you? And Wally's like, Paris better? And he quickly whooshes them to Paris with he gives Linda a dress and him a suit, like, instantly. And she's like, you aren't seriously going ahead with this, are you? And he's like, well, I was going to say something about how I'm already the fastest man, and I hope you'll make me the happiest, but that is kind of lame, and I'm a sucker for tradition, so will you marry me, Linda Park? I mean, if you haven't planned anything else for the rest of your life. And it ends with the proposal, and we don't get to see the answer, because that's the end of the issue, and you're going to have to tune in for issue 142, which we won't be covering until next week. But that's not the end of this episode, because we got the 80-page Giant and Flash Annual 11, which were kind of like in between this run and Mark Waid coming back. But before we talk about those, there was a small story that happened after this that was also written by Mark Millar that I'm just going to talk about for a little bit. Not long. It won't take long to explain. So in this story, Mark Millar himself is at a local bar. He's been tasked with writing The Flash by DC, and so, you know, he shows up and is trying to come up with an idea for a Flash story because he can't think of one. And so who does he meet with in order to come up with the Flash story? He meets up with Wally West, the Flash, himself. He offers Wally a drink, and Wally's just like, "I'll have a seltzer. That's all I need. Like, I just have a water." And they start like spitballing story ideas between each other, like Captain Cold, Weather Wizard, and Wally's like, I don't know, it's a little bit lame. Maybe you should go with something a little bit existential, something out there, something meta, something fourth wall breaking. He's like, okay, what are you thinking about, Wally? And Wally's like, how about you write a story where we meet up, like about us meeting up and talking about making a story. And Mark's just like, I like the sound of that. Who's the villain? And Wally's just like, no villain, just us talking about making this story. And he's like, I'm still not sure. I mean, the story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's plenty of action in the flashbacks, but I like to have a wee twist to finish with. A joke before the hero heads off to his next adventure. How am I supposed to tie the whole thing up? And it turns out that there's a distraction on the TV. Mark turns his head, and Wally disappears. And that's the joke that Mark uses at the end of the issue, where he's like, Flash? And there's a guy behind the bar, and he's like, time to settle up, Millar, just because your pals disappeared doesn't mean the tab does too. He's like, nice one, Flash. A wee gimmick at the end is exactly what the story needed. And it ends with Mark Millar looking at his laptop, typing the story, Your Life is My Business, which is the name of this story, and that's where we get the credits, written by Mark Millar and Wally West, art by Ariel Olivetti and Tom McGraw. And yeah, that was the little story that happened at the end that I just wanted to talk about a little bit. And so now we're going to talk about The Flash 80-page giant, or 70-page giant, because 10 pages are just ads. So yeah, we're going to be covering this monster of an issue with multiple stories in it. Let's see if we can get through this. So the first story that we're going to be talking about in the 80-page Flash special is a story called The Speed of Life, written by Mark Waid with art by Popman and Chris Ivey. The story begins with Wally West in a wheelchair trying to get into the Flash Museum. And there's a woman that's like, if you want to come into the Flash Museum, you can come in tomorrow, but I've got to go home. The museum is closed. And Wally says to himself, whenever I feel the wind in my face, I can almost imagine what that something was. Almost. But then like the breeze, it fades and drifts away, leaving me stranded, leaving me paralyzed. My name is Wally West, and I am the saddest man alive. And essentially what this story is it's kind of like an alternate look. Like, I guess Mark Waid was just like, I want to do a story where I just imagine, like, what Wally's life would be like if he didn't become Kid Flash or the Flash, and that it would be the shittest life ever. Just completely depressing. Wally works in an agency called the Go West Travel Agency in Blue Valley. He has immense struggles with his parents. His mum found his dad cheating on her, and so they split up, and he ended up having to live with his dad, but he tried to get away from him because his dad was abusive. His partner, Frankie, ended up leaving him because she thought it was better to move away because she'd be happier, and Wally's chasing after her as she flies off in an airplane. He's like, no, we can make it work. Like, we can make a great life together. No! He still idolizes the Flash, but he isn't Kid Flash in this timeline. Instead, he's forced to watch somebody else become Kid Flash instead of him. And then he mentions how, like, his life is gets worse and worse. By age 14, I know I'm trapped, locked into a future that's one dark tunnel of sorrow and despair, a life sentence waiting to be served. But then the impossible happens. Thanks to my Aunt Iris, I meet my hero, the Flash. And then he's like, oh, I wish I had powers like you. And then he gets hit by the lightning and he becomes Kid Flash. and he's like, and in one split second, my tomorrows, every last one of them, are transformed by a single bolt of lightning. Now and forever, I'm fast, I'm free, and nothing will ever hold me back. And we get like a panel of Wally as Kid Flash becoming the main Flash. And the whole time we've been seeing someone trying to light a match, and it's revealed at the end of the story that it's Linda lighting a match for Wally's birthday cake. She's like, Wally? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, my mum was wondering, what? And she's like, your wish. Never mind, sweetie. You tell me the same thing every year. You got your best wish when you were a boy, the one that made all the difference. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you never became Kid Flash? And Wally's like, once, and only for a second. And that's the end of the story. That's it. Just short and sweet. It was alright. Just very depressing and a little confusing when I was reading it. I was like, oh, okay, so it's like, it's Wally imagining what his life could have been like. The confusing part was when he saw another Kid Flash, because it looks like Bart Allen, but it's definitely not Bart, because that Wally was young when he saw it. Like, when he saw the Kid Flash on the screen. But yeah, that's the end of that story. And the next story that we're going to be talking about is A Tale of Two Flashes, written by John Byrne, a lot of people's favorite writer on Twitter. Just kidding. And also the art is by him as well. So yeah, let's see what... I think this is the first time I've ever written a story, or read a Flash story written by John Byrne, so this will be interesting. Let's see how it is. Okay, so Dark of the Sun, written by John Byrne, with art by John Byrne, is... The thing with John Byrne is that people tend to say a lot of stuff about him. Like, a lot of people don't like his version of Superman and stuff, and so it's very common to just hate any story that he writes purely because he wrote it. I'm not going to do that because I actually like this story. I think it's a great story. I think it sums up the Silver Age perfectly. I think it's a great love letter to the Silver Age. It's a great love letter to Jay Garrick and Barry Allen, who star in the story, and it takes place within continuity as well. Like, it fits. So, this takes place after The Flash of Two Cities, which used to be called The Flash of Two Worlds, but it's not called that anymore because Crisis happened, and so Earth 2 doesn't exist anymore. And so in this new timeline, because Jay has always existed on Earth Prime now, instead of coming from another world, Jay just came from another city, and so they met each other. You know, I guess Barry Allen grew up with the legend of Jay Garrick the Flash and his comic books, and then met the man himself, and they became friends. So this story takes place after that. In that story, they fought the Shade and the Thinker and the Gambler, I think, was the third villain. That's important because the Shade is the main villain of this story, hence the name Dark of the Sun. Barry and Jay go out to dinner with Iris and Joan. At this point in time, Iris doesn't know that Barry is the Flash, but Joan knows that Jay is the Flash. And I'm pretty sure Joan knows that Barry is the Flash as well, but she's playing along because Iris doesn't know that Jay is also a Flash, and she doesn't know that Joan knows. So Joan just kind of pretends that she doesn't know. So they're out to dinner, and the girls go to powder their noses, and Barry and Jay decide to have a little chat with each other, and then suddenly the sun gets blocked out, and the Shade appears in the bathroom and kidnaps Iris and Joan and gets away in the Shade-mobile. And so Jay and Barry chase after it. They find they find out there are multiple Shade-mobiles and that they're all decoys. They go after one and it disappears. They go after another one and it disappears. Meanwhile, Shade takes Joan and Iris to his little bunker, and his plan is to keep Jay and Barry busy enough that his machine will eventually go off and create a giant black disc that will absorb the power of the sun, covering the entire city, or like both cities, and will destroy the ecosystem. That's his plan. and that if Barry and Jay can find his bunker, then they can stop it from happening. But he's hoping that the distractions will last long enough that they won't be able to find him. Also, it wasn't the gambler; it was the fiddler. So, he's like, and they only have 1 second left to stop the machine, and then suddenly a blur comes out of nowhere and punches him in the face, and he's like, the Flash, but which one is it? And Barry comes vibrating through the wall, and he's like, oh, that's Jay. The reason why he's all blurry is because he's stark naked right now. Like, he's not wearing any clothes. And they stop the machine, and Joan and Iris are like, why are you naked, Jay? And Barry's like, well, that's part of how, that was part of the whole plan. Once we found out that the Shademobiles were fake, we knew Shade was expecting to see both Flashes chasing after the Shademobiles. So what we did was, Jay took his clothes off, and then I pretended to be Jay by swapping between both of our costumes, while Jay came here to knock out Shade. And then Iris was like, but what about Jay and Barry? Like, if the Shade grabbed us, what about them? And Barry's like, oh, I'm pretty sure they're fine. Like, they're just still having dinner. We can go over there and see them, and maybe they'll have dessert there for us. And Jay, winks at Joan, and that's the end of the story. That's it. Simple as that. I thought it was a great story, and I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend reading it. Just because it's John Byrne doesn't mean it's automatically going to be bad. John Byrne can write characters well. There are just some characters that he doesn't write well, or interpretations that people don't like Superman. But enough about that, because we're moving on to the next story, which is The 5,000 Rats of Bartholomew Allen, written by Todd DeZargo, with art by Ethan Van Sciver. Everyone knows about him. Very controversial artist. Known for sexual assault and shit. Not gonna dwell on that too long. But he did the art for this. Probably one of the earliest comics he did art for, I would think. But yeah, let's talk about this story. So the story begins with Bart Allen and his class on a field trip to the Manchester Animal Husbandry Facility, where they find out that the animals are going to be sent to do intelligence-based tests. And one of Bart's classmates, I can't remember her name, but she's his love interest, basically is against this because she's like, oh, they're going to be torturing them and stuff. And Bart accidentally lets one of the mice out, and the mice runs over to a computer and starts typing on it. And Bart is like, oh, he's accessing the computer's mainframe. Well, there's something you don't see every day. Meanwhile, a bunch of gorillas, led by Gorilla Grodd, arrive at a supercomputer. It's in Gorilla Grodd's base, I guess. And their plan is to have all of these animals be sent to government facilities for quote-unquote intelligence tests, when in actuality they're being planted there to steal government information, to send them to Gorilla Grodd so that he can gain control of all the nuclear weapons and have America and the rest of the world bow to his whim. But when they go to receive them, the animals are all gone. And Max sees this on television, and he's like, oh, isn't that where Bart went for his field trip? And so he immediately goes to see Bart, and is like, Bart, where are the mice? And Bart's like, look, they were going to do tests on them. And Max is just like, put your costume on, let's go, we got to get those mice, we got to get them back. I know they were going to torture them, but you still stole, and you can't do that. So we have to find them. And it turns out Bart kept them in the gymnasium, the school gymnasium. So Bart and Max go there, and they find the gymnasium empty, which means they got out, which means they're out in the public. So Max is like, alright, you go east, I'll go west, we'll try and find all these mice and rabbits and stuff. So they start running around the city, getting all of them. They manage to grab a bunch of them. They manage to find all of the animals. And then instead of taking them back to the testing facilities, they take them all to pet stores so that they can be adopted by people. and then Gorilla Grodd gets really pissed off because they didn't end up being taken to government facilities like they were supposed to. They got taken to pet stores, and so instead of receiving government documents, he was receiving letters and emails saying things like, "Dear Grandma, how are you today? I am Finn. Tyler was teasing me, and Mummy said I was a good girl to ignore him. We had cake at school today." So he's getting like emails from little kids and stuff. And then Bart gets a couple of mice himself, and the mice are Pinky and the Brain, and they decide that like they're going to take over the world. And it sounds like I'm being sarcastic or joking, but I'm not joking. That's literally how it ends. It ends with Pinky and the Brain being Bart Allen's new mice. It literally ends with them, with Pinky being like, "So what do we do now?" And the Brain is just like, "I think the answer is obvious, my friend. The world is ours for the taking." And they look like Pinky and the Brain. It's really weird. But it's like realistic depictions of them, or like artistic depictions of Pinky and the Brain. What a... wow. Probably one of the weirdest endings I've ever had, like I've ever read for a DC comic. Like, and it's not even that weird. It's just the fact that Pinky and the Brain are canon characters in the DC universe. So, you know, if somebody was to write a DC story, you know, they could use Pinky and the Brain if they want to, or like this universe's version of Pinky and the Brain. But anyway, that's enough of that story. The next story that we're going to be reading is The Professional. So Professional is our very first Jesse Quick story, written by Christopher Priest with art by Mike Collins and Tom Palmer. So this story is essentially a story about Jesse Quick trying to get out there on her own and be her own hero, but she's still a little bit hard-headed. She's a little bit too ahead of herself, and that isn't going to make things easy for her, or as easy as she thinks they can be. Because right now she's in the headspace that she can be an amazing superhero, but the reality is that she's still learning a lot, and that's what this story deals with. It's the fact of learning from your mistakes and taking the learning opportunities whenever they come up. You know, so like her mom calls her about Captain Boomerang attacking the city, and instead of continuing to talk to her mom on the phone, Jesse Quick immediately heads off to fight Captain Boomerang. And they have a massive fight, and one of Captain boomerangs explode with a bunch of metal dust, which cause a bunch of static electricity to electrocute Jessie, knocking her out and creating a field of electricity around her. And she's like, the cops are trying to like get close to her, and she's like, "No, like there's too much static energy, you gotta get back, otherwise you might cause us all to explode." So she manages to like use her speed to expel like the electrical field that's around them, which leaves her incredibly pushed to the point of exhaustion. She passes out, and when she awakes, she finds this really handsome doctor looking over her, who I'm not even going to talk about because he's kind of a weird love interest for her, and I have a feeling that they never go on for this. I'm guessing that like Mark Waid or anyone who's writing Jesse Quick never adds on to this, because this is just something that Christopher Priest decided to come up with himself, because he clearly loves just creating love interests for characters. Because every time I've read a Christopher Priest story, a big part of it is always like, there's a love interest. And up until this point, Jesse Quick has never had a love interest, and all of a sudden she's talking about this random model guy called Brian, like this guy that looks like a model. And then she meets this doctor who is this guy, and he's really interested in her and stuff. It doesn't matter. What matters is that her fight with Boomerang and her losing the fight cost her the chance to catch Captain Boomerang, because while she was knocked out, he succeeded in stealing everything that he was doing. And by the time she finds the location that he was going to go to in order to steal from a safe, she opens it up to find a boomerang in there that says "Clever Girl." So she was too late, and Jesse Quick loses. And disappointed in herself she comes to terms with the fact that she needs to stop thinking too quickly and too far ahead, and that she needs to slow down and allow her the ability to learn from her mistakes and learn from people, because she's still new to this. It's funny, while she's in her office, Impulse randomly shows up and eats all her candy, and there's also a mouse in the same panel. So is that Christopher Priest tying this story to the Impulse story, where this is one of the mice that Bart owns? I don't know. She then calls her mom, and her mom basically complains to her, saying, like, I don't know why you didn't let me help you. Like, you probably would have been able to catch Captain Boomerang if you weren't so hard-headed and left before I could give you any advice. Because obviously her mom was a superhero. And then she calls Wally, and she decides, she's like, Wally, it's Jesse. You got a minute? I could use some advice. So she's finally giving in, and she's deciding to actually ask for help from other people, ask for advice, and an opportunity to learn and grow as a superhero. And that's the end of the story. Out of all the stories I've read so far, this is probably lowest on my tier. I love Jesse Quick, but I think this story overall was, while it had a great lesson for Jesse, I think it was really weighed down by the fact that half of this story focuses on this useless love interest doctor dude who just isn't important at all, and yet he's in multiple pages of the story, and that's why I skipped him over, because talking about him didn't matter. You ever wanted to hear a story about how Max Mercury and Babe Ruth met? Well, have I got a story for you. Thunder and Lightning, written by Michael Jan Friedman with art by Craig Rousseau and Vince Russell, is the story about how Max Mercury and Babe Ruth met each other. When I was reading The Flash, this entire time I was thinking, man, I really wish I knew the story of how Max Mercury met Babe Ruth. I've got nothing against Babe Ruth. I just don't know anything about him, and I don't care about baseball, and so this story I just didn't really care about. Babe Ruth was a baseball player from the 20s, who was like the greatest baseball player at that time, and in this story, he gets kidnapped by a couple of guys because they want their team to win because they've held a lot of bets, and the only way to win the bets is to kidnap Babe Ruth, so that they can guarantee that his team will lose. And so Max Mercury is fighting some guys in a warehouse. He's going by the name Lightning at this point in time because Max Mercury gets voted through time. And so right now he's in the 20s. And so he finds out from these thugs that Babe Ruth has been kidnapped. So he goes searching for where Babe Ruth is being held. He finds them, he beats the crap out of them, he frees Babe Ruth, and then he takes Babe Ruth to his game, and Babe Ruth admits to Max that he hates the fact that he needs to live up to the idea of being the greatest baseballer of all time, because he's like, what if I miss a home run? Then what do I tell my kids? What do I tell my sponsors and stuff? And, Max talks to him and tells him, and he's like, I go through the same thing, I have to live up to this title of a superhero, and it can be overwhelming, but all you can really do is just do your best, hope for the best, and if you do ever, crash, there's nothing to be shamed about that, because that's human. So Babe Ruth goes out, he plays a game, and he hits a home run, and that's the end of the story. He goes into the game, and he continues playing baseball, and he does a good job. And that's it. Not really much to talk about. But the next story I find a lot more interesting, because this one is all about John Fox. You remember John Fox, the Flash from the future who replaced Wally West in the present because he tried to get with Linda Park. And Wally got lost in time. He eventually came back, and John went back to his own time, where he'd become a fugitive. So I'm curious if this story is continuing that and seeing John's life as a fugitive. So let's find out. So this John Fox story, which is called Split Seconds, is written by Brian Augustine with art by Oscar Jimenez, a great Flash artist, and Eduardo Alpuente. I hope I pronounced that right. So John Fox is a fugitive of the 26th century, so he heads to the 29th century instead, and when he gets there, he immediately sees a bunch of the authority that live there. They know who he is, they know he's broken the laws of time travel, and so even though he's traveled to the 29th century, 300 years from then, he's still a branded criminal, and so they just capture him and put him in prison. But then a siren gets set off, which causes his guard to run away, and it turns out the siren was set off by two characters known as Eric and Fran Russell. And if you read Flash comics, you would know that Eric and Fran Russell are the biological parents of Iris West. Because if you've never read The Flash, or if you haven't listened to the trial of Barry Allen story that I talked about, because I'm pretty sure I mentioned about this origin, Iris West was born in the future, and her parents sent her back to the past because the future sucks, because they live in this dystopian world that sucks to live in, and they don't want their baby growing up in a world like this. So they send her to the past, where she lands in the backyard of Ira West and his wife, whose name I don't remember. And they adopt... Like, I don't think her name was Mary West back then. Maybe it was. I don't know. So, she gets adopted by them and becomes their child. So that story is kind of retconned in this, but not entirely. Like, it still happens that way. It just turns out that John Fox helped them get Iris to the past. So he takes a look at their machine, and he finds that the vibrations of the machine are slightly off. And that's why they're having problems sending her away, like getting it to work. So John fixes it for them so that they can send Iris to the past. And then meanwhile, a giant ship is attacking the city, and they're going to shoot a giant, like a nuclear missile that will destroy everything and kill everyone. So John decides to go and stop the missile. They launch the missile. He uses his speed to get on top of it. He vibrates his hand through the missile and pulls out the technology that is like nuclear. Like, he uses his speed powers to like disperse the nuclear energy by vibrating his body parts into it, and causing it to leak out of the missile so that it's got no nuclear energy in it anymore, so it won't create a massive explosion. But it still will create an explosion regardless. So what John does is he lessens the impact by vibrating the missile enough so that the explosion doesn't harm anyone too badly. Like, he kind of takes the brunt of the explosion. And then Iris gets placed into the time machine, and during the explosion, John uses his time travel powers, because he has time travel powers, to transport himself further through time and find a different time period for himself to live in. And the comic ends, the issue ends with, the story ends with Iris arriving in Ira's backyard, where she is adopted by her new parents. And they call her Iris West. And that's it. She didn't actually have a name given to her yet when from her biological parents. She is named at the end of this story. They call her Iris West. And yeah, that's the end of the story. Overall, pretty good. Definitely one of Brian Augustine's better stories when he's not writing annuals. When he's not writing annuals, he tends to write better stories. Like, I kind of like John Fox. I'm glad I got to see another story involving him, and it was cool having him be involved in Iris's origin, and getting to see a different angle to that origin, because we haven't really seen it from the perspective of her biological parents, so it was cool to see that and see, that be established. And yeah, that's the end of the 80-page giant. That was the final story. Overall, pretty good. There wasn't really a bad story. Like, the Christopher Priest one is probably lowest on my list, but I still enjoyed it. They were all pretty good. I liked them. The next story, the next issue that I'm going to be talking about is the final issue of this episode, Annual 11, which was part of like a line-wide DC initiative which was called Ghosts or Ghosts of the Past, and it was essentially supposed to be kind of like a horror annual theme where each character was going to face ghosts of characters from their past, which is similar to Blackest Night. Like, it's not Green Lantern related, but it was a similar idea that was later adapted for the Blackest Night story of people facing their worst nightmares, which is the dead people from their past. So, yeah, let's check out Annual 11, see what it's like. It's written by Brian Augustine. So, Annual 11, the story is called Haunts, and it's written by Brian Augustine with art by Anthony Williams and Ray Chrising. So, Wally is the fastest man alive, and he's also the fastest man asleep. In this story, Wally goes sleep running, and while he's running, he opens his eyes as somebody is calling out to him, and he sees Johnny Quick, the dead Johnny Quick, father of Jesse Quick, or what seems to be his ghost, which obviously freaks Wally the hell out. He ends up in the middle of the desert and has to run all the way home, where he finds Linda, and he tells Linda that he saw Johnny Quick's ghost, or like he saw Johnny Quick. He doesn't want to assume it's his ghost, but Linda is the only person he tells. Max shows up, and we all know Max kind of has an idea what's going on, but Wally still lies to him anyway, and is just like, I don't know, I feel like I'm just having weird dreams or nightmares. And then Jesse shows up and is like, hey, for some reason, I felt like I was being called to come see Wally. I don't know why. I kind of heard my dad or something. Would somebody be able to explain that to me? And what does Wally do? Oh, he tells her everything. He tells her the truth. No, of course not. He lies to her, because that's what he always does. Whenever it's Jesse Quick, like, Wally just has this thing where he just lies to her, even though in previous stories, he has established that, he's promised to her that he's never going to lie to her again, and he's going to tell her the truth from now on. And then what does he do in the story? He freaking lies to her. Anyway. And then Tina McGee shows up. Remember Tina McGee, the first love interest of Wally West, who has been absent from Flash comics for a long time, which kind of sucks because I like Tina and Jerry. She shows up, and she basically says that Jerry's Velocity 9, like the stuff in his system that made him Speed Demon, has started to crop back up. He's gone crazy again, he's Speed Demon again, and so Wally needs to go and stop him. So Speed Demon is causing problems in the town, so Wally goes and tries to deal with him, and he notices that Speed Demon is way faster than now. Jerry is... Like, Wally has to go at top speed in order to keep up with Jerry. So while he's tumbling with Jerry, he eventually makes it to top speed, and Johnny Quick appears to him again, and this causes Wally to wig out, and Jerry unfortunately gets away. And Wally still refuses to tell Jesse Quick the truth. And then Tina gets really mad at Wally because he failed to catch Jerry. And that's what pushes him to finally tell everyone. Or he's about to anyway. Like, he's lying to them, and then he's kind of just like, that's not fair, Tina, I'm trying to help, but I'm having problems of my own. For some weird reason, I can't seem to go at top speed without... And then Wally is like, that's it. It only happens when I'm at top speed. So he realizes that the reason he's probably seeing Johnny Quick, or whatever this is because Johnny Quick was in the Speed Force, And when Wally is at top speed, it's when he's closest to the Speed Force, and that's probably why he's seeing Johnny. So he decides to test it out. He goes to top speed, he sees Johnny again, and Johnny tries talking to him, because he's trying to ask Wally something, and then he loses Johnny, and Max catches up to Wally, and it's just like, Wally, what the hell is going on? And Wally's like, it's Johnny. I keep seeing him. I keep seeing, like, his ghost or something. I don't know. And Max is like, I thought that was the case. It makes sense why Jesse keeps showing up and keeps sensing something. But why is he showing up to you and not Jesse? And then they kind of figure out, like, oh, Wally, you're the one that's connected to the Speed Force, not Jesse. And so that's why he's showing up to you and not her. But we gotta find out why he's showing up to you. Like, what does he want to talk to you about? So, Wally goes to deal with Speed Demon, who has shown up in a mall causing trouble. And they fight each other in, like, a ball pit where Speed Demon throws, like, all the balls at him rapidly. And they just chase each other around, like, the jungle gym. And eventually Jesse shows up after Speed Demon gets away again. And that's when Wally finally tells her what's going on. And he's like, I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be upset. Like, I didn't want to make you upset. And Jesse's like, well, you made me upset just by not telling me. And that's when Jesse says to Wally, like, the reason I'm not seeing my dad and you are is because you have a direct link to the Speed Force and I don't. So if you want to talk to my dad, you're going to have to go to top speed and talk to him and then try and find a way for me to get to see him, because I'd like to see my dad, because I never got the chance to say goodbye to him when he died. So they find Speed Demon again. Wally chases after Speed Demon and grabs him, and then uses his powers to carry Speed Demon so fast that it burns the Velocity 9 out of his system. And it works, and so Jerry reverts back to normal. And then I guess they just leave Jerry on the road for a bit while Wally communicates with Johnny. He runs fast enough, he communicates with Johnny quick, and that's when Johnny finally gets a chance to tell Wally what he wants, which is that he just wants to see Jessie and he wants to say goodbye to her for the last time. And he wants Wally to figure out a way to get Jessie to see him. The best way to do that is for Wally to find Jessie, grab her, which he does, and then have her in tow when he reaches the Speed Force so that she can see Johnny as well. So Wally carries Jessie fast enough so that she can see Johnny as well. And Jessie and Johnny have a really heartfelt moment. He's like, thank you, Wally. I can't tell you what this second chance means to me. Barry was right. You are the best. Like, Barry, he said that recently. He's like, yes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a reunion to attend. Hello, Pumpkin. And she's like, oh, Daddy. And they just have like a really sweet moment where he's like, sweetheart, when Savitar and his girlfriend snookered me and I was pulled into the Speed Force, I knew instantly that my race was run. And I also knew that you were more than ready to take my place. Just know, Jessie, that though I didn't come back from the Force like Wally, it wasn't because I don't love you. Of course I do. And the one thing I've learned about the other side is that love goes on forever. Run the race for me, sweetheart. Do well. Goodbye, Pumpkin, for now. And she's like, goodbye, Daddy. Thank you. And so Johnny goes back into the Speed Force, his like essence, and then Jessie and Wally head back out of the Speed Force, and Jessie thanks Wally and like hugs him, and it's really emotional. And then it gets this amazing emotional moment gets ruined because Jessie kisses Wally. She kisses him. It's It's gross. It's horrible. Because Jesse feels like reading the Flash, the relationship between Wally and Jesse have always felt like the relationship a brother and a sister have. And so when she kisses him, it feels gross. Like, even though they're not blood related, it feels wrong and it feels gross anyway because they are as close as family. I don't know what Brian Augustine was thinking when he did this. But bro, like, screw you for doing this. This is canon. This happened. Hopefully it never happens again. But unfortunately, we just have to live with the fact that Jesse Quick and Wally West have kissed. And it was disgusting. And Wally was not into it, luckily. Or I don't know. Like, he doesn't have any reaction to it other than, like, when she kisses him, he's just caught by surprise. He's just like, whoa. But he doesn't say anything afterward. They just kind of go past it. Obviously, he doesn't tell Linda, because why would he? So they head back to the hospital where Jerry's all good. And then Tina also tries to kiss Wally, and Wally's just kind of like, Tina, my girlfriend's right here. My fiance, we're engaged now. And then that's it. Like, the day is saved. Jerry is all good. Jessie got to say goodbye to her dad. And Linda and Wally decide to go home with each other. And Linda's kind of just like, I'm gonna get my revenge for having to hang out with your ex-girlfriend all day, Wally. Yeah. And then they head home. And that's it. And while they're heading home, Wally is like, I don't have any bad ghosts watching me, just good ones. And there's Barry and Johnny in the sky. And that's the end of the annual. And my feelings on it are as simple as, it was pretty good. I really enjoyed the stuff between Jesse and Johnny. The Speed Demon stuff was a little unnecessary and just felt like it was in there so that the comic could reach. But because it's an annual, we needed to have 49 pages, so it was just to fill that out. Everything about Jessie meeting her dad and finally getting to say goodbye to him was amazing, and then it was ruined with the kiss between Jesse and Wally, which really undercut the story. But other than that, it was fine. And with that, can't believe we had to end it on that note, but this is the end of today's episode of Flash Forward. I hope you really enjoyed it. The Grant Morrison and Mark Millar run is definitely something special that it's one of those runs that I've read where I'm like, I wish either of them would get another chance to write The Flash again and actually be allowed to do a proper run instead of just filling in for a year. You know, like, I would love it if Grant Morrison or Mark Millar were given the chance to just write The Flash for as long as they wanted to, or for as long as DC would let them, you know, so that they would get a good 30 to 50 issue run depending on how well it's received, because they very clearly had a lot to tell with very little time to tell it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had other stories that they wanted to tell that they didn't get a chance to. So I would hope that at some point in the future, I know Grant Morrison isn't really with DC that much anymore, but I'm sure that they would probably be willing to come back on special occasions. I don't know. Grant Morrison loves The Flash, so it might be one of those things where if DC asked them to come back for The Flash, that might be one of those occasions where they would be like, yeah, sure, like, I'd love to come back and, you know, do another Flash run. Yeah, Black Flash was great. Human Race and Black Flash are definitely up there as some of my favorite Flash storylines now. I can't really pick one over the other because they're just so different. Black Flash definitely leaves more of an imprint on the Flash. legacy, or like the Flash, like Flash's history, because the Black Flash would come back a lot. Human Race is kind of more of a one and done story where it's a really amazing story, but it doesn't leave much of an impact on Wally West or the Flash overall. But it's still amazing, So it's really hard to judge which one's better. I don't think you really can. I feel like they're too different in terms of tone. It's really just whatever one you prefer or what you're looking for in a Flash story. The Jay Garrick single issue was amazing. I love Jay Garrick. It's great to see him get his own stories and be the main character of the book. I'd say the weakest story was the first one, the one with the suit, and I still enjoyed it. I'd say that was the weakest one because of how confusing it was. That's the problem with Flash stories that involve time travel, is that you gotta be careful, because if it ends up confusing, then it's not fun to read. And it's especially not fun to explain, like I had to do. So yeah, that one, was it Full Stop? Yeah, that one was good, but definitely lowest on the list of these stories. But still good. Yeah, and that's it for this episode. And next week, we're going to be beginning DC 1 Million, which is a crossover event written by Grant Morrison and a bunch of other writers. Grant Morrison wrote the main title and some of the tie-ins, and then a bunch of the tie-ins were written by other writers. I'm going to be doing the whole thing. I've got the omnibus. I think it's 39 issues or something. So we're going to be spending a lot of time on that. We're going to be spending like 4 weeks on that, I'll say. I think I'm going to do it like 10 issues at a time. Going to split it up in that over 4 weeks. So that'll be good. We're going to be deep in the world of DC 1 Million for a little while. So we'll get right into that, and that'll be our norm for a while. So I'm looking forward to that. That's the thing about these big events that I look most forward to, is being in them for quite some time, so that we can get used to them, and then it's a bit emotional when we get to the end and it's like we're done and we're not going back and we're just gonna keep going forward. So yeah, next week DC 1 Million. So hope to see you then, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, get it around so that it hits the algorithm, and hit the notification bell. It's very important, otherwise you might not even know that my videos are coming out. So yeah, thank you and have a good one.